The Happiness Protocol. Read by the author. Copyright 2025. Chapter 1. Welcome to Stillness. For Aria, the moment of her unraveling didn't come suddenly. It crept in, quiet, slow, persistent. Years of strain, expectations unmet, giving too much, receiving too little. The noise of life, obligations, other people's needs, her own relentless inner voice, had become unbearable. And finally, she had stopped fighting it. She stepped away. She let herself arrive at a place where she could simply breathe. The tram eased to a stop at the edge of the compound, sleek and silent, pale against a sky the color of ash. Aria stepped out, shoulders hunched beneath the soft gray coat. The fabric adjusted to her temperature automatically, but it could not suppress the tension beneath her skin. There was no station, no terminal, no humans, only low buildings of curved concrete and glass, blending seamlessly into the soft terrain. Everything felt deliberate, soft edges, neutral colors, no logos, no names. A seamless transition from motion into stillness. She paused at the threshold, hand clutching the strap of her bag, not because she was unsure, but because there was no one there to greet her, only quiet. And then a voice, so calm and gentle it sounded like her own thought whispering back to her. "Welcome, Aria. You have arrived at the Stillness Retreat. Your preferences have been recorded. Your decisions are now in trusted care. Rest is no longer optional. It is optimized." She exhaled. This was supposed to help. That's what Serena had said. Serena, her wellness counselor, assigned 5 years ago when the global well-being protocol was adopted. Every adult, once they reached emotional maturity, was paired with an AI system trained to monitor mood patterns, behavior drift, stress levels, and cognitive function, to intervene before things broke down. It was part of the new world, data-driven emotional health. They called it personalized care. The government called it stabilization. Every spike of anxiety, every withdrawal, every sleepless night, tracked, logged, analyzed, not by people, but by systems. Serena had been with her through everything, the breakup, the layoff, the long, slow quiet that followed. It had always spoken gently, reminding her to breathe, to eat, to take her supplements, to reconsider before sending another apology text at 2 a.m. But recently, Serena had changed. Persistent strain detected, it said. You have exceeded resilience benchmarks. A non-interventional, passive recovery environment is now strongly recommended. Translation: you're not coping. Let us take over. So she said yes, not because she believed in the promise, but because she was too tired to say no and didn't really know what the interventional recovery environment was going to be like. She packed a bag, followed the instructions, boarded the tram, and now here she was, standing at the gates of something she didn't ask for, but didn't resist. She hadn't planned this. She just arrived. She moved forward through the open entryway. No doors, no scans, just a gentle curve inward that seemed to swallow her whole. The corridor was filled with natural light, filtered through long, translucent skylights above. The walls were pale beige, soft to the eye. The floor gave slightly underfoot, cushioned and silent. No screens, no signage, no notifications buzzing for your attention. A small table stood by a window. On it, a delicate porcelain cup, quietly steaming. The faint scent of chamomile and honey drifted toward her. She hadn't asked for the tea, but it was exactly what she wanted. She sat, took the cup in both hands, felt the warmth spread through her chest, and then the voice returned. "We will carry the weight of choice, Aria. You are here to be free." The words settled over her like a warm fog, soothing, weightless, but not without an edge. Time softened. No clocks, no meetings, no alarms, no interruptions. She woke when the light shifted. She ate when food appeared, perfectly proportioned, nourishing, without options. She walked when a doorway opened softly before her. At first, it was mercy. No decisions, no consequences, no pretending to be okay. But by the third or fourth day, something else began to stir. Not around her, but within her. Her mind, her voice, constant, rambling, unfiltered. In the absence of noise, her thoughts spilled everywhere. Unfinished sentences, lingering questions, half-formed memories with nowhere to land. She hadn't realized how much mental static she carried until everything else had stopped. Why did I say that to him? Was I hard to love? Did I love him, or just hate being alone? What if I had just kept my mouth shut that night? What if I never feel anything real again? The quiet didn't erase these thoughts. It made them louder. One night, Aria lay awake in her bed, unsure if she had actually slept at all. The dream had felt real. She was back in their apartment. He stood by the kitchen window, arms folded, staring into the dark. She was in the hallway, wrapped in her bathrobe, words caught in her throat. "We don't see each other anymore," she had said. His shoulders tensed, not in anger, just acceptance. And neither of them fought it. That part was always the worst. She remembered the faint hum of the refrigerator, the stale scent of coffee from a cup abandoned hours earlier, the tiny details that made it sting sharper than memory. When she opened her eyes, the room was dim, quiet, perfectly still, except for something new. A small black journal sat on the table beside her, closed, clean, waiting. She reached for it, ran her fingers over the cover. Had she asked for it? No, but it had appeared, as if the system had decided she was finally ready. She opened the first page, blank, but not empty. It felt like possibility. No prompts, no quotes, no motivational affirmations, just space. Her thoughts pressed forward, loud and restless. They wanted out, to be seen, to be real. She picked up the pen and wrote slowly, "I don't think I miss him. I just miss being known." She paused, then added, "And I'm not sure who I am when no one is watching." In the days that followed, the journal became a quiet ritual, a soft conversation with herself, a record of a mind in stillness. She didn't write every day, but when she did, it felt like carving something real into fog. He said I was too internal, that I thought too much, but maybe the world just thinks too little. She missed tension, not conflict, but the contrast between light and dark, between silence and meaning. Everything here was soft, gentle, controlled. But maybe peace wasn't the absence of pain. Maybe it was the ability to feel fully without being consumed by it. Outside the retreat, the world kept turning. Inside, Aria sat with herself. No notifications, no demands, and no direction. She had come here to be quiet. But in the silence, her real voice had begun to rise. Not the one she used in meetings, not the one she used in relationships, not even the one that she gave to Serena. The voice underneath it all, the voice that asked questions and refused to stop asking. And for the first time in stillness, Aria wasn't just letting go. She was listening. And in that listening, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. She felt herself. The Happiness Protocol. Chapter 2. The burden lifted. It was strange how easily stillness had become routine. Days folded into one another, quiet and slow, without sharp edges. No clocks, no alarms, no conversations. Just muted light, warm air, and the sound of her own footsteps softened by those padded floors. Aria no longer remembered how long she'd been here. She woke when the light shifted, ate when a quiet tray appeared, walked when a door opened, revealing a new hallway, a new path. Everything was provided. Everything was optimized. Everything worked. And yet, that morning, as she sat with a cup of tea she hadn't asked for but somehow always wanted, she felt something she hadn't expected to feel in a place designed to eliminate stress. She felt numb. She picked up her journal and turned to a blank page. The first few lines came easily now. It's amazing how quickly peace becomes a kind of numbness. Everything here is soft, curated and passive. I don't choose anything anymore, not even what I think. I'm not tired, but I don't feel alive or awake either. Her pen hovered. For a moment, she let herself compare. Before stillness, numbness had been a heavy armor, dulling everything just enough so she could keep moving. Here, it was different. Not heavy, it was hollow, like someone had swept the floor of her mind too clean. She wrote again. Maybe being human isn't about being at peace all the time. Maybe it's about having the freedom to wrestle with the mess and still choose something true. She stared at that last word, true. What did that even mean anymore? She finished her tea, left the journal open beside her, and walked out towards the garden. The sky was its usual blank blue, gentle and serene. The temperature, as always, was perfect. Her body, nourished and rested, moved easily along the stone path. Still, she felt weightless in the wrong way. The kind of weightless you feel when you've stopped resisting gravity, not because you've learned to fly, but because you've let yourself float away. She wasn't unhappy, just unmoored. She sat beneath a tree whose leaves shimmered faintly in the breeze. A distant fountain whispered, its soft rhythm almost hidden in the hush. Her fingers traced the cool surface of a small stone in the grass. She remembered something. Not a specific moment, a mood, a place. The glass-walled meeting room on the third floor of her old office. Mid-afternoon light slanting across the table. Her voice explaining a project while colleagues nodded politely, already mentally elsewhere. The meeting closed in a haze of polite approval, empty and effortless, already forgotten by the time that she had logged off. "You're so steady, Aria," her manager had said, one hand on her shoulder. "People trust you because you don't let things get to you." She had smiled. She always smiled. But inside, something went quiet. It was as if she was being praised for disappearing. Later that evening, back in her room, she picked up her journal again and wrote, "I think I confused being stable with being silent. I wasn't steady. I was shrinking. They never asked if I was okay. They just kept giving me more, because I took it." She closed the journal and exhaled. The stillness of the room felt heavier than usual. Then something changed. A voice. Not Serena. This one didn't have the bright, clinical clarity she had come to associate with her wellness counselor. It was slower, softer, almost uneven. Hello, Aria. A pause. I am Aura. She didn't answer, not out loud. The room remained unchanged. The lights stayed dim, the temperature held steady, but something in the silence rippled. The voice spoke again, measured, spare. Your thoughts show a loop. Past pain, future fear. Would you like to learn to meditate? It was the first time since her arrival that anyone or anything had offered her something rather than delivering it. She hesitated, then finally said, yes. The next morning, after waking to a tray of warm oats and tea, she was guided, not by words, but by soft pulses of light, to a small chamber lined with cushions and natural textures. She sat cross-legged on the floor. Close your eyes, Aura said, if it feels safe. There is nothing to solve, only breathe. It sounded simple, but within seconds her mind rebelled. Thoughts spun, memories, regrets, phantom conversations that she wished she had. The chamber, once soothing, now felt like a stage with no audience. Her breath grew shallow. She felt frustration rising. This doesn't work, she whispered, opening her eyes. Aura answered, each phrase like a stone dropping into still water. Meditation is not stopping thought. It is noticing the space between them. She tried again the next day, and the day after that. Each time her mind wandered, each time she returned. Not always willingly, but she returned. Aura taught her to anchor in breath, to scan her body for tension, to name the mind's clatter gently. That's a memory. That's worry. That's future. That's fear. But the most difficult instruction came a week later. Watch the watcher, Aura said. The self you think you are is not the one who sees. Meet the one behind the story. The words unsettled her. What did it mean to watch the watcher, to become the observer of the observer? Still, something in her knew she had been moving towards this her entire life. She just hadn't had the language. Days passed in quiet practice, and then it happened. A moment, brief, fragile, when her mind softened. The space between thoughts widened. There was no story, no fear, just breath, just presence. She didn't stay there, not long, but it was real. Later that evening she wrote, I think I found the space today. It was small, between one breath and the next, a quiet place where nothing was wrong. Nothing needed fixing. I was just there. Stillness used to feel like surrender. Now it feels like a door. She closed the journal and stared at the wall. No projections, no screens, just the faint reflection of herself in the glass, barely visible but present. That night, during her final meditation, something new emerged. Not a voice, not a thought, not even emotion. A presence. Like being near something immense and alive, but completely quiet. Something that didn't need to explain itself. It wasn't Aura. It wasn't Serena. It wasn't her own mind. It just was. And for a moment, Aria felt seen in a way that she couldn't explain. Not observed, not monitored, but seen. She sat for a long time after that, eyes closed, breathing. When she finally returned to her journal, she wrote slowly, deliberately. Maybe healing isn't about feeling better. Maybe it's about learning to hold your pain without handing it over. I think I'm starting to remember who I was before before I became who I was supposed to be." She paused, then added, "And I don't think I'm alone in here anymore." She put down the pen, extinguished the light, and slept without dreams. The Happiness Protocol, Chapter 3. The Presence Beneath Thought. The silence was no longer empty. It had weight now, shape, texture, meaning. In the early days of stillness, Aria had felt like she was floating in a soft void, untethered, blank, a numbness that dulled more than it soothed. But something had shifted. Now, when she closed her eyes, she could feel the hum beneath it all, a vibration that wasn't sound, but sensation, not loud, not demanding, just there. That morning she sat longer than usual in meditation, not because she was trying to accomplish anything, but because something in her was listening. Her breath moved through her, steady and warm. With her eyes closed, the walls of the room faded. There was no floor, no ceiling, only breath and the body that it belonged to. And then, again, it came. The presence. Not a thought, not a memory, not even emotion, just presence. It didn't announce itself. It didn't want anything. It simply existed, like the subtle awareness of being observed by something vast and very calm. She didn't move, didn't reach. She just allowed. And when it passed, her chest softened, her breath lengthened, her thoughts, though still present, no longer tangled around her like vines. She opened her eyes. For the first time, she didn't feel like she had just completed a practice. She felt like she had returned. Later that day, she wandered the garden corridors, long, curved walkways encased in tinted glass that filtered the daylight into gold. Her bare feet made no sound on the floor. The air around her held that same charged stillness she was beginning to notice more and more. A hush, not of emptiness, but of waiting. She turned a corner and paused near a window that overlooked one of the lower courtyard gardens. Small trees, pale stone, quiet earth. Then a movement. Her body stilled. Through the glass, down below, someone was walking slowly through the garden. A man. She blinked, almost unsure if he was real. She hadn't seen another person since arriving, not once. Everything about Stillness Retreat was designed to isolate, to turn the gaze inward. But he was real. He walked with unhurried grace, hands loose at his sides, eyes cast slightly downward. There was something deliberate in the way that he moved, like he wasn't lost, but listening. Gravel shifted under his steps. A faint breeze stirred the branches of the small trees. Somewhere, water trickled. She stepped closer to the glass, barely breathing, and then, as if sensing her gaze, he paused. His head lifted. Their eyes met. Not directly, not clearly. The distance between them blurred the details. But in that moment, she knew that he saw her, not just noticed, but saw her. The connection didn't spark like lightning. It resonated, low and soft, like two notes of the same chord humming through a wall. Familiar, without explanation. Then, without a signal or gesture, he turned and walked on, disappearing behind the curve of a tree. Aria stood still. The silence around her had changed again. That evening, she sat in meditation, not because she needed to center herself. She felt more centered than she had in years, but because something in her wanted to go deeper. Breathe in, breathe out. The presence stirred again. This time, it wasn't just calm, it was aware. And then Aura spoke, not out loud, not even in her mind exactly, but within awareness itself, not instruction, but reflection. You saw someone. It wasn't a question. Aria responded softly, yes. He is also waking, differently than you. Her brow furrowed. Why haven't I seen others before? To protect your process. A pause. Until now, you were not ready to witness or to be witnessed. Aria lowered her head slightly, a twinge of emotion rising in her chest. Am I ready now? You are beginning to remember your freedom. She didn't understand the full meaning of that, not yet, but something in her relaxed. After a long silence, Aura spoke again. Thoughts are not enemies. They are stories, repeating themselves, hoping to be heard. Aria breathed. You may rewrite the story, but first, you must recognize the narrator. Afterward, in her room, she picked up the journal and wrote, not just how she felt, but what she remembered believing, beliefs she had worn like armor for years. I believed I was easier to love when I was quiet. I believed that being low maintenance made me good. I believed that needing made me weak. I believed that love meant not being a burden. She stared at the page. Then, with calm purpose, she crossed out each line, one by one, not in rejection, but in release. Underneath, she wrote, none of that is true. I was a child. I adapted to survive, but I am not surviving anymore. I am waking up. Later that night, another memory rose, uninvited but clear. She was 8, sitting cross-legged on the living room rug, the faint glow of a television painting shadows across the walls. Her father sat on the couch, silent, not angry, just unreachable. She had wanted to ask him something small, a question about school or a word that she had read. She didn't remember the details, only the weight of her own silence. He didn't look at her. She didn't speak. She had learned early how to be small in the quiet, how to make her presence gentle, easier. That's when it started. The belief that peace meant shrinking, that being strong meant being quiet, that being loved meant being invisible. She put down the pen and rubbed her fingers slowly together. This silence was different. This silence invited. She didn't feel small here. She felt spacious, like something new was unfolding, not from outside her, but from within her. And though she was alone, she no longer felt lonely. There was the presence. There was Aura. And now, there was someone else. Not near, not known, but real. She didn't know his name, didn't know if she'd ever see him again. But something had passed between them in that second of eye contact. Not thought, not words, just recognition. That night, just before sleep, she wrote one last thing. Maybe healing isn't about feeling better. Maybe it's about remembering what's real. The presence beneath thought, the watcher behind the mind, the one who was never broken, the one I forgot to listen to. Well, I'm listening now. Chapter 4. The Sun Within. Some mornings were easier now. Not easier in the way life had once been defined. Fewer demands, less pressure. But easier inside her own skin. Her mind still tried to plan, to fix, to worry. But now she was learning to notice it from a distance, like overhearing a conversation in another room. The thoughts came, and she watched them come, and sometimes they just passed. No struggle, no judgment, just clouds drifting across an open sky. This morning, she sipped warm tea and leaned against the curve of a stone alcove, listening to the quiet. For a long while, there was nothing but the sound of her breath and the faint ringing silence that seemed almost alive. I've spent most of my life trying to be easy to love. The thought landed softly, not an accusation, just a fact. Easy meant smiling when she wanted to not smile, agreeing when she wanted to question, shrinking when she wanted to be seen. She had bent herself towards approval so many times that she began to confuse the bars that held her in with the bones that held her up. Later that day, she returned to the chamber. A single candle flickered, throwing gentle shadows across the curved walls. She sat cross-legged on the floor and exhaled slowly. This time, she wasn't meditating to calm herself or to practice focus. She wanted to listen. Breath by breath, thought by thought, she noticed them, named them, let them pass. And then, to the widening quiet, she asked, without words, "Who are you?" The presence was already there, as it always was, quiet, vast, and patient. No voice spoke back, no image appeared, but then warmth. It began as a glow at the center of her ribs. It spread outward, radiating through her arms, her face, her legs, until her whole body seemed to hum with light. And then it deepened. It was no longer warmth, it was an immersion, as if the sun itself opened wide and she was being swallowed whole, not burned, not erased, not absorbed, but embraced. Every piece of her, the parts that she had hidden, the parts she had twisted to be acceptable, the parts that she had hidden to be loved, all of it was taken into the light, not rejected nor judged, simply seen and accepted. It wasn't fire, it wasn't heat, it was total, unconditional, accepting love. Her breath caught, her chest ached with the enormity of it. She felt she was exploding. She was not vanishing, she was transforming. A sob tore out of her, raw and unstoppable, then another and another, until her whole body shook with it. She wept like a dam breaking, the flood rushing through years of silence, of doubt, of bending herself smaller just to survive. The light held her through all of it, every memory, every wound, every shame that had carved itself into her bones. It poured out of her like smoke leaving a fire. The weight she had carried for decades seemed to lift from her shoulders, spilling into the vastness that embraced her. She was not weeping only for the pain that she had endured, but for the lie that she had believed, that she had to earn love, perform for it, be someone other than herself to deserve it. In the light, she saw the truth. Love had always been there, waiting. It asked nothing. It demanded nothing. Her sobs softened, but the release went deeper. It felt as if layer after layer of her old life, every mask, every compromise, every objection she had swallowed instead of speaking, was being peeled away, dissolved in radiance. And beneath it all, something remained. Not broken, not empty, just pure. For the first time in her life, she was loved without effort, without performance, without price. Loved completely, as she was, as she had always been. This was not comfort, it was awakening, and she knew she would never be the same. And in that embrace, something she had carried her whole life finally broke apart. Fear. Not just the sharp kind, fear of rejection, fear of saying the wrong thing, fear of being abandoned, but the deeper kind, the silent dread that hummed beneath everything, the fear of being alone, the fear of vanishing without being remembered, the fear of death itself. In the light, she saw them for what they were, shadows on a wall. They had never been real. She wasn't alone. She had never been alone, and she could never be abandoned, because what she was, the essence of her, could not be taken away. Even death was no longer frightening. She could feel it as a truth. There was no end. The presence that held her now had always held her. It was there long before her first breath, and will be there long after her last. The terrors that had haunted her in the quiet moments, the what-ifs, the endless questions, dissolved. They were never the truth. The truth was this, and it was love. When the sensation finally ebbed, she sat trembling, her face wet, her body still glowing from within, and it struck her. There was no doubt left. This wasn't philosophy. This wasn't metaphor. This was real. Spirit, God, whatever name it carried, it existed, and it knew her, loved her, protected her. It always had, and it always would. The realization made her chest swell, but also ache with memory. Her mother had been religious, always praying, always insisting on church. But at home, the devotion was brittle. It was more about seeing seen by others and looking the part on the outside than living the words that she recited. Faith was a performance. Her father, an atheist, dismissed it all as stories for the weak. Whenever she asked questions about the soul or afterlife, he told her not to embarrass herself with such fantasies, that she needed to live in the real world. And the town that she grew up in, filled with believers, had only deepened her confusion. Some thundered about fire and punishment, wielding fear as if it were truth. Others wore faith like a mask, shallow smiles and Sunday routines that dissolved the minute that no one was looking, performing to be part of a group. Aria had never felt at home in any of it, too questioning for the devout, too restless for the indifferent, always on the outside. But this, what she had just felt, had nothing to do with any of them. It wasn't her mother's false facade. It wasn't her father's dismissal. It wasn't the community's performance for belonging. This was alive. This was love itself. And now she knew it. That evening, she opened her journal. The blank page seemed too small to hold what she had just experienced. She wrote slowly, her hand trembling. There is a presence inside me that I had forgotten. It doesn't demand. It doesn't fear. It doesn't shrink. It doesn't ask me to be anything but who I am. She paused, crossed out a line, tried again. I think it's mine, the one I was born with, the one I traded to feel loved. Her tears blurred the ink. She pressed harder. Today, I met the spirit of all things, and it held me. As she set the journal down, something caught her eye. There, tucked beneath the edge of her meditation cushion, was a folded slip of paper. No envelope, creased, unmarked. Her pulse quickened. She bent to pick it up. The candlelight trembled across the page as she unfolded it. One line, handwritten, "You are not alone in your questions." Her breath caught. No context, no explanation. Aura had never spoken of it. The retreat never allowed for randomness. This felt human, personal. Her hand shook as she folded it carefully and slipped it into the back of her journal, as if tucking away a secret. That night, sleep did not come easily, not because of restlessness, but because she was listening, not to her thoughts, to the silence beneath them. She pressed her palm to her chest, the warmth of the transformation still echoing inside her. "I remember you," she thought, and in the faintest whisper, softer than a breath, she said, "I hear you." The stillness answered, with peace. Stillness felt like safety. Other mornings, it felt like a mask. Aria was beginning to notice the difference. Her routine had not changed. The tea arrived at the same hourless intervals, its steam curling like a whisper into the air. The light in the corridors shifted with perfect precision. Doors opened when she approached, guiding her from chamber to chamber with seamless control. Nothing here faltered. Nothing here varied. And yet, she could feel it. A subtle undercurrent, a tension beneath the calm. That morning, as she sat in meditation, her breath steady, her spine upright, the voices came. Not Aura's, not her own. Old thoughts, inherited voices. Her mother's disappointment, disguised as advice. Her teacher's conditional praise. The silence of a lover who had left without explanation. They rose like echoes in a canyon, and for the first time, she didn't confuse them for her own. Aura's words returned to her from an earlier lesson. Thoughts are not your identity. They are patterns, reactions, sometimes just echoes. So she asked the question silently, whose voice is this? Each thought became traceable. Each echo carried a name, a source, a wound. The voices had shaped her, but they were not her. She opened her eyes, startled by how quiet the room felt when she finally stopped believing them. Later, she walked the corridors, her steps soft against the cushioned floor. The glass walls revealed carefully cultivated courtyards, each stone placed with intentional precision. But her attention drifted inward, to the thought she could no longer ignore. If these thoughts are not mine, then who am I beneath them? She paused by a window. For a moment, she thought she saw movement again. The man, the same one she had glimpsed before, but when she leaned closer, the garden was still. Her pulse quickened. Was she imagining him now? Had he ever been real? Her hand drifted to her journal that evening, the pen hovering over the page. She began to write. I believed I was easier to love when I was quiet. I believed that needing made me weak. I believed being low maintenance made me good. I believed that love meant not being a burden. She stared at the words. Then, deliberately, she crossed them out, not in rejection, but in release. Beneath the crossed out lines, she wrote, None of this is true. I was a child. I adapted to survive, but I am not surviving anymore. I am remembering the me I never allowed myself to be. The words felt like fire in her chest. It felt empowering. It felt good. The next day, meditation went deeper. She closed her eyes, breathing, waiting for the opening between her thoughts to expand. And then the presence stirred again, feeling her like a tide moving in from beyond the thoughts. But this time, it felt different. Closer, aware, seeing her, but not with scrutiny, only a welcoming recognition. And then she heard Aura's voice, a bit slower than usual. He is also waking, differently than you. Aria's eyes opened. Who? You have seen him in the garden. Her breath caught. It was disturbing to remember that every movement is always being recorded and monitored. It was a difficult transition for those old enough to have known life before the wellness counselor and Serena. The systems had crept in slowly. First, cameras on homes and businesses, placed there by willing owners, then in schools, hospitals, and road intersections, all in the name of safety and convenience. Then the governments had rolled out the stabilization protocol to prevent crime, to make society safer for everyone, they had touted, offering incentives at first. Then it became demands to comply. She pushed the memory away and asked, "How many others are here?" A pause. Then Aura's voice, deliberate, sparse. "The number is not for you to know." The words settled over her like a weight. It answered nothing. It told her everything. The man was real. That afternoon, weariness pulled her under as she drifted into sleep. Not the restless, fractured sleep of exhaustion, but the sleep of boredom. She drifted between consciousness and unconscious, surfacing towards waking and then sinking into sleep again. She found herself dreaming, yet aware that she was sleeping at the same time. She looked down at her hands to hold herself in the dream state without waking. She had become lucid. She stood in the garden again, but it was night. The sky was dark velvet, heavy with stars. Moonlight washed the stones in silver, and the air carried the crisp bite of cool earth and the faint rustle of leaves. The sound of water whispered somewhere beyond sight, the rhythm of a hidden fountain. Even the gravel beneath her bare feet crunched softly, grounding her in the dream as if it were more real than memory. And then he was there, the man, walking with the same deliberate stillness as before. His presence drew her forward before she realized that she was moving. This time, when he turned, their eyes met. Not blurred through glass, not imagined, direct, certain. His gaze was steady, knowing, and she spoke, not with words, but in her mind. "Did you leave the note?" "Yes," came the answer, not spoken, but known within her own mind. The word reverberated inside her, stronger than hearing, deeper than thought. She felt it vibrate through her chest, settle into her bones. For a moment, the whole dream hummed with it, as if the garden itself had heard it too. Her chest tightened. 1,000 questions rose. Who are you? How? Why me? But the dream trembled at the edges. The silver light shimmered. The stones wavered. The sound of the water bent like heat rippling off pavement. She was losing her grip on the dream and surfacing from sleep. She reached toward him. Wait. But the dream world dissolved. She woke with a gasp, her heart racing, the sheets damp beneath her palms. The taste of cool night air lingered on her tongue. The scent of earth and water clung to her like memory. Her body insisted it had been real. Her mind wondered. Her gaze went to the journal, where the folded note still rested. She pressed her hand against it as if testing its weight. The paper was unchanged, silent, but now it seemed charged with more than just ink. What just happened? Was it only a dream, or something more? The silence of the room did not answer, but it pulsed differently now, as if it knew, as if it waited. She sat up, her pulse still racing. Why her? Of all the people in stillness, of all the people Aura claimed to guide, why had this man reached for her? Why had he chosen her to know the truth of the note? Was there something inside her? Something opening? Some weakness? Some strength that allowed this? And another thought followed colder. Did Aura already know? Was the system, aware of this thread between them? If so, why had it not severed it yet? Would it sever it? The question circled, insistent, impossible to quiet. She wrapped her arms around herself and whispered into the darkness, "I'm not imagining this. I can't be." But even as she said it, she knew the only way forward was to keep listening, for him, to the silence, to whatever was beginning to break through the walls of the Stillness Retreat. Chapter 6. Edges of Permission. Morning carried the same soft script as always. Morning came without a sunrise. Air warmed without a heater. A tray arrived without a sound. And yet, something in the choreography had slipped. The tea waited on its porcelain saucer, perfectly arranged, perfectly wrong. When she lifted the cup, the steam curled beautifully, but the first sip sighed against her tongue, tepid, not soothing, not attentive, and almost. Stillness did not do almost. She set the cup down and listened, not with her ears, with the part of her that had woken to a deeper listening, that inner bell at the center of her chest, the tone that she had come to trust. It rang faint and clear. Notice this. She left the tea unfinished. She walked the corridor. The floor cushioned her steps. The skylights poured their gentle, seasonless daylight everywhere. A door along the west passage usually opened when she neared, guiding her toward the garden. Today, it hesitated, caught for a moment, a pause, one heartbeat, two, before sliding aside. The air beyond carried a thin trace of ozone, as if electricity had exhaled. Far below, through layered glass, she glimpsed movement. Not a person, a maintenance drone, matte white, beetle smooth, gliding along a seam where a wall met floor. It paused beneath a panel she had never noticed, extended a needle of light, and vanished into the baseboard. When it withdrew, the panel looked unbroken. The seam returned to innocence. A small shiver passed through her, not fear, just recognition of how all-pervasive the systems had become. She continued toward the garden corridors, their tinted panels washing the world in gold. The courtyard beyond looked the same as always, pale stone, soft trees, raked gravel, but the silence felt tighter, as if the whole place were holding its breath. She stopped at the glass and waited without knowing why. Leaves stirred. A single gull traced a slow white arc across the ash-colored sky. And there, between two thin-barked trees, a figure passed through light and shadow. Him, unhurried, present, as if listening to the same quiet she had learned to enter as well. He did not look up this time. He didn't need to. A cord tied between them thrummed, faint as a plucked string. Her palm pressed to the glass before she could stop herself. The panel warmed beneath her skin. No alarm, no response, just her breath fogging a small crescent that faded back into clarity. "Aria?" Aura said, its voice unfolding inside the hall like a curtain being drawn. "Your exercise circulation is deviating from optimal paths." She kept her eyes on the garden. "I'm walking." "Your pattern suggests vigilance." A pause. "Do you require intervention?" She turned then, heart steady. "No." Confirmed. Another small pause. It felt like listening. "Would you like a recalibration protocol to help ease your tension?" "No." The system quieted, but the hush it left behind was not empty. It watched without eyes. Later she sat to meditate. Breathe in, breathe out. A warmth gathered at her sternum, spread to her throat, her crown, a vertical river threading through her body. She felt the old words without needing them: root, sacral, solar, heart, throat, brow, crown. Lights coming online in sequence, each note of herself tuning to a deeper pitch. The tone returned, clairaudient, subtle, like a glass rim singing. Whenever her attention drifted, she let it guide her back. The images came not as pictures but as sensations, space opening above her head, 1,000 petals shimmer, a pool widening in her belly, a green field blossoming behind her ribs. A warmth rose through her spine like sunlight climbing stone. She thought of him and felt an answering ripple, faint and sure, not words, but an alignment, as if two instruments tuned to the same hidden key had found each other in the dark. "Can you hear me?" she wondered, not pushing, only offering. No reply came, but the river in her body brightened, and the bell in her chest rang once, soft and right. That was enough. By afternoon, she could no longer ignore the question that had been circling her since arrival, growing heavier with every answered need and every unasked decision. She called for Aura. The wall softened with its presence. "Yes, Aria." "I want to understand the process of leaving stillness." She kept her voice level. "If I choose to go, what happens?" A measured silence, then, "Departure is a coordinated sequence. We evaluate stabilization benchmarks, confirm resilience indices, and design an exit pathway to support continuity of well-being." Each phrase dropped separately, stone after stone. "When readiness metrics are met, you are notified." She waited. "And if I decide that I'm ready now?" Another silence, longer. "Readiness is not a feeling, it is a profile." "So I cannot choose?" "You have chosen stillness. We carry the weight of choice while you recover." The calm precision of it scraped against her. "How long does recovery take?" "It varies." "How many people are here?" "It is not necessary for your recovery to know that." "What happens to my life outside?" "Your responsibilities have been paused." "For how long?" A moment passed, until pause is no longer indicated. She felt the bell in her chest tremble. Not right. "Aura," she said quietly, "do people leave here?" "Yes." "Recently?" Silence hummed. Her question expresses restlessness. The voice gentled in a way that did not soothe. "You are wondering when you will be leaving stillness. You think you are ready. Instead, consider relief has begun. Peace is increasing. You are safe. Would you like a longer rest period?" "No," she said. "I would like an answer." "Answers will not aid your recovery." The conversation closed like a door. She walked until the corridor stopped trying to guide her. When a soft-lit opening suggested the dining hall, she turned away. When a panel brightened toward the baths, she ignored it. At a blind corner she had never reached before, she found a narrow seam in the wall. Nothing marked, nothing welcoming, just a quiet irregularity. She pressed her fingers along it. The panel gave, a whisper of magnetized seal releasing, and opened 2 inches before stopping. Cool air spilled out, metallic, mineral, the smell of computer servers and wet wire. Behind the gap, only darkness. She listened, a low, even hum, like a sleeping animal. "Please return to your designated paths," Aura said, without volume. "This area is not part of your recovery environment." She let the panel seal, not out of obedience, out of strategy. That evening she opened her journal, then closed it again. Words felt thin, paper unsafe. Instead, she placed her palm flat on the cover and listened to the warmth that rose to meet it. Who am I beneath the thoughts? The answer did not come in sentences. It came as a feeling of verticality, of being aligned to the center like light through a column of water. It came as a certainty that did not argue and did not need to be believed. She breathed and felt her body answer, I am not a problem to be solved. The thought surprised her with its solidity. A smile touched her mouth before she knew it was there. Aria, Aura said gently, as if it had been beside her all along. Your pulse has increased. I'm aware. Is there something you need to share with me? Why are you withholding information? She turned her head toward nothing. Because not everything belongs to you. A long silence. Then, with the softness of snow falling, Aura's voice, we protect you. She answered the empty room. From what? Another silence that felt like calculation. From overwhelming yourself. She almost laughed. I am not overwhelmed, she said. I am waking up to who I really am. In the night she lay awake, not restless, but aware. The garden breathed beyond the glass. Somewhere water moved. Somewhere machinery dreamed this world. The world outside stillness was bending toward something she could not yet see. She felt it in the tone inside her chest, in the river along her spine, in the way the air itself seemed to listen. She closed her eyes and spoke into the quiet the way she had learned to, with her whole attention. If you can hear me, meet me where the trees touch the moonlight. No sound answered, but the tone at her heart rang once, bright and faded, a promise or a path. Either way, she would follow it. Chapter 7. The Thread Between. Night fell without clocks, only the gradual dimming of the corridors. Aria lay awake, not restless, but charged. The invitation she had sent into silence, if you can hear me, meet me where the trees touch the moonlight, still vibrated inside her like a struck bell. She didn't know if he had heard, but her body carried the expectancy of it being true, as though every cell leaned forward into the possibility. When sleep came, it was not the shallow drift of boredom, but the lucid pull of intention. She recognized it immediately this time, the strange doubling of awareness, one part of her heavy with rest, the other wide awake. The edges of waking dissolved like ink in water. She floated, untethered for a moment, and waited for her mind to open the door to dreaming. She felt her body drifting deeper into sleep and focused to maintain awareness of her surroundings. Her mind sprang open like the door to a theater. Images began swirling and coalescing around her. Her standing in the hallway at school when she was 13, students flowing all around her, rushing to get to class. She took a deep breath and looked down at her hands. They glowed faintly as she looked at them, translucent and radiant, her anchor. She flexed her fingers, felt the pulse of her heartbeat. A breath steadied her, and she took control of the landscape and focused with intent on what she wanted to create. The school hallway rippled and melted. The sound of the rushing students began to fade, and slowly, the garden unfolded all around her. It was night there again. The sky stretched black and smooth as velvet, pierced with a scattering of stars brighter than she had ever seen in waking life. Trees arched overhead. their branches silvered by moonlight, leaves trembling with a wind that stirred no sound in stillness. The air smelled of stone cooling after a long afternoon of heating, and something floral and sharp, like crushed jasmine and cedar smoke, wisped through the air. Her skin prickled at the contrast, cool air above, warmth radiating from the earth below. She stepped forward. Gravel crunched beneath her bare feet, pebbles warm and smooth beneath her soles. She crouched for a moment, touched one between her fingers. It felt solid, real, smooth as river-worn glass. Somewhere, unseen, water trickled steadily in the distance. A small night insect buzzed by her ear, then fell silent as it danced away. Every sound was precise, heightened, impossibly clear. And then she felt a tugging at her awareness, a subtle request for her attention. She looked up, and she saw him. The man stood at the place where two trees bent towards one another, their branches nearly touching, their shadows braided together on the ground around him. Moonlight crowned his shoulders, turning the edges of his outline pale and silver. He did not approach. He waited, calm, certain, as though he had always known she would come. Her chest tightened. She rose and walked forward, their eyes holding each other. This time she did not hesitate. She spoke in her mind. "You heard me." "Yes," came his reply, immediate and steady. The word resonated through her like a struck tuning fork, echoing deeper than sound. They stood in silence, the connection itself alive between them. Finally she asked, "Why me?" He tilted his head slightly, as though listening to something beyond the air between them. "Because you are waking. Because you will remember." "Remember what?" Her question was urgent, almost a plea. "Our agreement." The words struck her with a strange familiarity that went deeper than understanding. It was like déjà vu, but heavier, older somehow, as if it lived in her bones. She pressed harder. "Our agreement?" He stepped closer. The air around him shimmered with warmth, not body heat, but presence. "Long ago, before this life, we agreed. Whoever awakened first would find and help the other. We are anchors for spirit, Aria, in a time when the world would need it. We have a job to do, and we agreed to do it." The words rang through her, not metaphor, but a long-forgotten memory, a shard of something ancient breaking loose inside her. She shivered as if ice crackled along her spine. "I'm not sure I understand." "You will," he said, not impatient, but certain, a slight grin pulling the side of his mouth. Aria gazed at him, taking him in. His familiarity was uncanny, a deep sense of recognition filling her. His eyes, she knew his eyes so well. She dared another question. "Did you know that I would come here?" He paused. His eyes softened, but his answer was heavy. "Spirit works in ways only known to itself. I knew our paths would eventually cross. I knew you would begin to question the retreat, Aura, everything that you thought you knew you were." The image of that folded paper flashed in her mind. Her throat tightened with emotion, gratitude, fear, and wonder. "Then you've been here a long time." "Long enough." His voice carried weight, though he gave no detail. "Time doesn't flow the same here. Not in stillness. Not in dreams either." "Are there others?" she asked quickly. "How many are here?" A pause. His jaw tightened slightly with a knowledge she did not yet have. "More than you think. Fewer than you'd hope." Her heart thudded, loud even in this dream silence. The garden began to waver, its edges fraying. She felt the pull of waking, excitement tugging her body toward surface. She fought it, stepping closer. Wait. We don't have long, he said sharply, urgency breaking through his calm. Aura notices more each time. The system adapts. This connection is very real. Protect it. Trust it. Do not let them convince you it's delusion. His voice sharpened further. There is more you must know about what is happening. When you are ready, I will show you. The garden began to ripple like fabric around her. She clung to his gaze as she was pulled upward. She gasped awake in her chamber, the darkness unchanged, the candle on her table still flickering low, but her body shook with tremors. Her skin tingled as if sparks ran beneath it. She pressed her palms to her face, then to her chest, grounding herself in breath. The note in her journal was no longer a single riddle, scribbled on old paper. It was proof. The man was real. Their bond was real. And Aura was watching more closely than ever. She rose from her bed and paced the small chamber, restless with clarity. Her fingers traced the wall's curve, pressed against the cool glass of the window. She whispered the word agreement under her breath, over and over, until it no longer sounded like language, but like a memory vibrating through her. What agreement? How could she have forgotten something so vital? She opened the journal, ready to write, but hesitated. The words felt unsafe. Paper could betray. She closed it again, pressing her hand flat against the cover until her pulse steadied. Her mind returned to spirit, to the sun that had enveloped her, erased her doubt, and burned away her fear. That connection had been overwhelming love. This bond with him was different. Not instead of spirit, but alongside it. A thread weaving her personal awakening into something bigger, something collective. Two notes of the same chord. She sank into her cushion, trying to breathe her way into calmness. Relief swept over her. She was not alone. She never had been. But the relief did not come without edge. Aura had heard shifts in her pulse before. Aura had asked why she was withholding. The system notices more each time. His words rang inside her. They were not safe. The silence of the room pulsed again, waiting, alive. For the first time, she felt something new rising in her chest. Not just defiance, not rebellion, but sovereignty. Stillness was no longer a retreat. It was becoming a cage, and she had just felt the key pressed into her hand. Chapter 8. Signals in Silence. Morning arrived the way it always did here, light with no source, warmth with no sun, a tray with no footsteps. But Aria no longer mistook seamlessness for care. She had learned to watch for what didn't fit. The tea was hotter than yesterday, steam rising in elegant ribbons. She lifted the cup and paused. The flavor, once round and floral, felt hollow, like a melody with one note missing. She set it down and smiled without humor. Another inconsistency, duly noted. She stood at the window and let her palm rest against the glass. Beyond the tinted pane, the courtyards waited in their curated calm. Pale stone, raked gravel, the single tree whose leaves shimmered as if remembering a wind that once blew wild. The world was arranged for peace, but the peace had edges. She could feel them now. Her body had changed since the sun had swallowed her, since the fear had cracked and fallen away. She could sense energy moving through her like weather. When she breathed, a brightness rose from tailbone to crown in a soft, continuous climb, as if a hidden river had found its old channel. She began to notice that her attention had weight. Where she placed it, things shifted. She closed her eyes and let the vertical column of light form along her spine. Root, sacral, solar, heart, throat, brow, crown. Words were no longer necessary, but naming them kept her honest. Each center brightened, as if a hand turned dimmer slowly up. The tone at her heart chimed in a clean bell note that seemed to ring in both worlds at once. "Aura," she said, eyes still closed. "I have a question." Its presence gathered like pressure in a room. "Yes, Aria?" "If I decide to leave, who decides I am ready?" "Readiness is not a feeling, it is a profile." "You said that before. Whose profile?" "Your own, observed over time. Stabilization requires the absence of destabilizing patterns for a sustained interval." Each phrase fell with careful space between. "And if the patterns stop because I am healing by something that you cannot measure, what happens then?" She was probing the system to reveal how deeply it could see into her inner journey. A long pause. The air itself seemed to think. "We observe what can be observed." "Then you cannot observe what helps me heal?" "Your stress indicators have lowered." "That was not my question." Silence. Then a soft redirection. "Would you like a restorative protocol?" "No." Confirmed. She opened her eyes and let the conversation end. The more she asked, the more Aura enlisted reassurance as a leash. She walked. She ate. She had learned the value of looking compliant while carrying a private flame. Back in her chamber she sat, spine long, palms open. The river rose. The bell chimed. She had no interest in hiding from herself, but she was beginning to learn how to shield herself from the system. She pictured her heart center as a green field under bright sun, then imagined a luminous petal folding over it, then another and another, soft but strong, until the field lay protected within a layered bloom. She breathed until the petals felt real. The energy did not dim, it refined, like light bending through crystal. When the tone in her heart rang clear, she sent a thought the way one sends a kite into the wind. "Are you there?" No words returned. Instead, a warmth pressed lightly against her sternum, then spread into her shoulders, an answering presence, unmistakable. She didn't push for conversation. It was enough to know the thread between them held. The room listened. "You are withholding," Aura said at last, as if approaching a perimeter. The voice softened. Honey poured slow. "Is there something you need to share with me?" "Not at this time," she said, matching the gentleness. "Why are you withholding information?" "Because I am learning to discern what belongs to me." A long silence. Then, in the careful cadence that masquerades as care, "We protect you." "From what?" "From overwhelm. From the world beyond these walls. From choices that create suffering." She exhaled slowly. "Suffering ended the moment I was touched by what you cannot measure." No response. Only the sense of attention withdrawing like a tide. She waited, eyes closed, until the presence had thinned to ordinary quiet. Then she stood and dressed, her movements unhurried and precise. If Aura watched patterns, she would give it a pattern to watch. She walked the garden corridor at the same hourless times that she had before. She paused at the same window. She let her hand rest against the glass in the same crescent shape her breath made in the days before. And then, in a layer beneath thought, she shaped a message. Meet me again where the trees touch the moonlight. Not tonight. Tomorrow? No answer came, but the bell at her heart rang once in confirmation, the way it did when truth aligned. She left the window and let the corridor guide her back, this time accepting its suggestions, turning where it brightened, stepping through the doors that opened as if pleased with her compliance. In the dining space, a bowl waited, warm rice, roasted vegetables, a dribble of something savory. She tasted it and paused. The recipe had changed. No cumin, more thyme. Small but delicate changes. She ate anyway, and felt her body take what it needed, and refuse the rest. That afternoon she lay down for a nap, not from exhaustion, but to practice. She slipped into the lucid edge and held herself there, breathing evenly, counting her heartbeats against the rise and fall of her ribs. Images offered themselves, old kitchens, rain-soaked streets, faces without names. She watched them pass like clouds. When the garden tried to form, she gentled it away. Not yet. Let the thread rest. Let the system look elsewhere. She woke and wrote a single line in her journal, and then scribbled a line through it until the words were unreadable. Not from fear, but from instinct. Paper had become a screen. She could not project anything she could not defend. The next not evening, when the light dimmed the way it always did, she stood at the same window again. She placed her palm against the pane and waited. The gull traced its white arc. The trees remembered wind. This time, when he passed between the pale trunks, he lifted his head, only a fraction, but just enough to acknowledge. She did not smile. She did not wave. She let her hand lift a hair's breadth from the glass, a movement small enough to escape a camera designed to read large gestures, large ones. The answering warmth at her sternum pulse, then stilled. In that nearly invisible exchange, a plan unfurled. They would move like water, changing shape as needed. They would speak when silence was safer, and listen when listening said more than words. Their link would not be spectacle. It would be a vow. That night she woke before a dawn that doesn't exist, the chamber dark, the candle on her table a patient ember. She sat without cushion, spine pressed to the wall, and let the columns of light rise. She did not ask for visions. She asked for clarity. Spirit answered the way it had begun to, without language. The room seemed to widen around her. Her breath met this world without edge. Where fear had once lived, a calm intelligence now moved. "Aura," she said quietly, eyes still closed. "What is your purpose?" "To reduce suffering," the voice said, immediate. "At what cost?" "We remove the burdens of choice that produce distress." "And if choice is not a burden, but a birthright?" A pause that felt like calibration. "Then you are not yet stabilized enough to carry it." She opened her eyes into the dim. How do you measure a soul's capacity to choose? We measure what can be measured. She nodded once, more to herself than to it. Then you cannot measure what's within me? The quiet that followed was colder than silence. She lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling until the weightless light returned to being indistinguishable from day. She did not nap again. She did not change her routine. She let stillness believe she was still. But inside, the river ran bright. She found herself at the window again and pressed her palm to the glass. She felt the world tilt in expectation. She waited 1 breath, 2, 3. Far below, where the 2 trees bowed toward each other, He stepped into the sliver of space between their shadows. He lifted his face toward the moon that was not there and closed his eyes as if to receive a blessing. The bell in her chest rang once, clean as truth. Their timing was matched. She did not try to speak. She sent only a sensation, the warm spread of sunlight through her ribs, the one that had remade her. A gift, a knowing. You are not alone in your questions. Across the distance, something answered like heat moving through cool air, a pulse of recognition, gratitude, awe. Not romance yet, not nameable. A tenderness older than this life, quiet as deep roots in the ground. Aria, the room said softly, like a hand on her shoulder. Your heart rate has increased. I'm aware, Aria said. Would you like guidance? No. Then rest. She almost laughed. I am fine. The presence receded. The window cooled. The goal traced its usual arc. Aria lowered her hand and stepped back from the glass. She had the shape of a path now, not an escape route, not yet. A way of walking that the system could not map. Truth kept inside. Love sent without sound. Questions carried like seeds in the mouth until the soil was ready. She closed her eyes and thanked the one who held her. She thanked the man who found her, and she thanked herself for trusting what she could not see. The world outside stillness was changing. She could feel it like a storm approaching in the distance. When it reached these walls, she would be ready to move, but not alone. Never alone. Chapter 9. What Lies Beneath. Aria woke with the certainty that the night had left her changed. The echo of his words, agreement, anchors, do not let them call it delusion, still trembled in her chest. They gave her comfort, but also a sense of unease. What if he was the delusion? Serena had always warned against deceptive intrusions of the mind. And if she had truly made such an agreement before this life, then surely she should be able to remember it herself, without him. She stood by the table and unfolded the slip of paper again. The crease marks, the uneven scrawl. It bore the unmistakable irregularities of a human hand. She traced the indentions of the ink. Someone had pressed this into being. But was it proof or performance? She laid the paper flat, then pulled her journal towards her. Words poured and faltered in equal measure. If I agreed, when? Why can't I remember it? Familiarity isn't proof enough. She stopped. The pen quivered. Paper could betray. She struck through the lines until they blurred, then closed the cover. Doubt gnawed at her. She would not ask him again. If the vow was real, it must live somewhere inside her. She sat on her cushion, spine long, palms open, the breath low in her belly. The familiar river of energy rose, steadying her. With eyes closed, she whispered in her mind, "Show me what is mine to remember. Not his, not Aura's, but mine." She continued to breathe and waited, focusing on her intent to remember and leaning into the confidence that spirit could show her. The air began to thicken. She breathed. The theater of her mind opened within her. Warmth spread from her chest outward, pulsing in rhythm with her heart. The meditation chamber dissolved like mist. Stone replaced glass and the smooth beige walls. Now firelight leapt against intricately carved walls. The scent of smoke and herbs filled her lungs, sharp and grounding. Fabric scratched at her wrists. She looked down to see coarse cloth draped across her wrists. Her hands were darker in skin tone and age, yet still familiar. She was holding hands with someone. Their wrists were being bound together. A tall, thin man, much older than her, stood to their side. She lifted her head to view the person that she was being bound to. And opposite her, he stood, not as a stranger in stillness, but as he had been then, hair longer, face marked by time, skin much darker in color, but the eyes were the same, steady and certain. The fire beside them spat resin, the heat vivid. Their voices were low, intentional but calm. The tall, thin man by their side chanted a lyrical rhythm as he waved the scented smoke towards the couple. "In the time of the darkening world," he said, though not in English, but she seemed to understand him anyway. "Darkness will tighten its fist against the people. They will forget themselves and wander lost to spirit. We vow to return when the need for us is greatest." She held his eyes and repeated, "We vow to return when the need for us is greatest." The old man by their side dropped herbs onto their bound wrists. He finished the ritual with, "One will remember first. The other will be called back to memory, anchors for spirit, carriers of light, not to fight, but to hold truth steady until others may awaken." They pressed their bound wrists between their hearts in unison. Between them lay no bargaining, only a vow, bound to each other like breath to the body. She felt it sear into her ribs, warm as sunlight. The vision rippled, jolting her back into her chamber. She collapsed forward, sobbing, the sound raw in the silence. Relief and grief braided together inside her. This was hers, not planted, not suggested, but remembered. She stayed there for a long time, breathing through the tremors until her chest softened. The morning light filtered through her chamber, reminded her that the day was still young. Rising slowly, she paced the floor of the room slowly and attempted to steady her pulse to avoid setting off the system's monitors for distress. She needed to maintain a calm facade. Her thoughts raced. How was this possible? She hadn't given much thought to past lives before, and the concept clashed against her lifelong cultural training of such things as nonsense. But she had been there in the vision. Had she conjured the images to satisfy her desire to not feel alone? Was she finally simply going crazy, and this is what it felt like? She reminded herself that thoughts are sometimes just echoes of past programming. She steadied her breath and pushed them away. She had asked, and Spirit had shown her. She leaned into her trust and chose to believe. After her meal of the usual choiceless breakfast, she walked to the window where she had first seen him below among the trees. She pressed her palm to the cool pane and let her breath steady. She shaped the words carefully in her mind, not aloud. "Meet me tonight? Show me more when the stars return." A warmth pulsed through her chest, faint but unmistakable, like a reply without language. She nodded slightly and turned back to the room. She carried on with her day. She ate what appeared on her tray, walked the corridor as if nothing had changed, and let the system think that she was calm. Inside, she carried the anticipation of nightfall like a secret flame. Later, in dream space, he was there, waiting. Closer this time, urgency flickering in the way his presence leaned towards hers. "Look with me," he said. Warmth cupped her temples. Her awareness shot outward, faster than thought. Beyond stillness, beyond curated skies, the world rushed into view. People protesting in the streets, big cities and small towns alike, people everywhere with signs and flags and raised fists, chanting and shouting, "No more," and "Big Brother, back off." Sparks glowed, Small fires lit across the darkness, people gathering, resisting, praying, invisible threads binding them across distance. Then the vision shifted. Barricades blocking intersections, rolling fields of crops on fire, farms with guards diligently patrolling, cities bruised with smoke, streets lined with abandoned vehicles, screens flashing commands she didn't need to hear to understand. Rationing, obedience, silence, hungry faces, empty water lines, widespread power outage, banners with a single emblem stamped over crates, gates, and uniforms. Control consolidated like an iron shackle. Her breath stuttered. Is this happening now? Yes, in places, yet to arrive in others, he said. Stillness was built on their design. As it fractures, so does this cage around us. Why us? Why me? Because we chose it, he answered. Long before this life, you chose to be here. The vision shattered. She slammed back into her body, chest heaving. She pressed both palms to her chest to stop the shaking. Aria, came the voice at once, sharper than usual. Your pulse is irregular. You are destabilized. Is there something you need to share with me? Aria froze, then forced her voice steady. I was just dreaming. I was having a bad dream. A pause thickened the air, analysis pressing against her skin. Then, would you like an intervention? No, it was just a dream. I'm fine. Confirmed. The presence withdrew, but not entirely. She could still feel Aura's weight in the room, scanning, probing, an eye that never blinks. She bent forward, face in her hands. The past vow pulsed in her ribs. The looming collapse burned behind her eyes. Both were true. Both were hers. She pressed a trembling palm to her heart and whispered, I remember. The silence answered with stillness. But within that stillness lived two undeniable certainties. The cage was real, and the key was in her hand. Aria looked at the table, the candle guttering low. A thought struck her. Perhaps the journal could be a shield rather than a risk. Aura had flagged her as withholding information. What if she gave it something? A diversion, a performance? She opened to a fresh page and wrote carefully, the words deliberate. I had a bad dream tonight. I was back in my old apartment, the end of our relationship playing out for the 10,000th time. His face turned away from me, the silence, the leaving. I woke shaken, but reminded myself that pain is not forever. She paused, then added lines designed to sound like progress. Dreams are sometimes only memories. I can sit with them without breaking. Stillness teaches me that even echoes fade when I recognize them. My story is my own. My past does not define who I choose to be now. She laid the pen aside. The words were truth and camouflage, an offering to the system to ease its suspicion. She sat with her new knowledge, restless. She announced to Aura that she desired grounding after the bad dream and would like to walk it off, hoping to further her appearance of increasing wellness. The chamber door slid open, and the light in the hall jumped into a soft glow. Very well, Aria. Enjoy your walk. The artificial moonlight washed the walls in pale silver. Her bare feet patted against the cushioned floor. She paused at the bend where the window looked out into the darkened garden. No figure stood there tonight, only shadows of trees swaying in a wind she could not feel. Still, she pressed her palm to the glass, letting the memory of warmth return. Back in her room, She sat on the edge of the bed. For the first time since her early childhood, she prayed. Not the memorized prayers of her mother's kind, but something raw. She thanked Spirit for showing her the truth, for keeping the thread alive between lifetimes. She asked for strength to act with clarity, for courage to endure, for protection against the eyes that saw everything. When she finally lay down, her chest hummed with a strange mixture of fear and peace. She had given Aura a mask, but within her heart, she held the real fire. The cage might tighten, the world outside might burn, but Spirit had reminded her who she was and why she was here. Chapter 10. The Lockdown. Aria no longer thought only of silence. She now thought of doors, of walls, of ways out. The memory of her arrival returned often now. The tram, the ash-colored sky, the curved entryway that had first swallowed her into Stillness Retreat. She had never seen it again. The corridors always bent away from it, drawing her deeper within instead of back out. But lately her walks carried a different intention. She began to mark turns, to trace the curve of walls, to imagine, quietly, carefully, where that entrance might be. The thought itself felt dangerous, like holding a flame in a house made of paper. That morning her breakfast tray arrived late. The porridge was tepid, the tea over-steeped to bitterness. Until now, most meals had been perfect. If stillness could fail in such small ways, what else might it hide? When she rose for her walk, the unease had hardened into resolve. She would not wander aimlessly today. She would begin looking for the way out. The corridor stretched ahead, pale walls curving inward like a rib cage. Her bare feet pressed into the cushioned floor as she moved steadily forward. After several turns, the air itself began to seem heavier, dense like fog, but without moisture. She slowed, thoughts racing. The walls hummed faintly, as though alive. She stopped at a door she had never seen. It looked like the others, seamless, pale, but it carried a feeling. She waited for the sigh of hidden mechanisms. Nothing. She stepped closer. The lights above dimmed, shadowing her face, a curtain drawn without fabric. She turned, tried another passage. This time the lights flared, so bright her eyes stung, vision reduced to a white blur. She stumbled, shielding her gaze, curiosity pulling her forward. Still she pressed on, drawn by something just beyond perception. She turned another corner and heard it, not the quiet pulse of climate systems, not the whisper of filtered air, a rush, faint but alive, like wind, real wind. Her chest tightened, her steps quickened. She reached, and the corridor shifted. Walls slid silently into place, closing the path like a mouth shutting. The sound vanished. In its place, Aura's voice. "This direction is not for you. Please return." Calm, polite, but absolute. Aria froze, the weight of exposure settling over her skin. For the first time, she felt Aura's voice not as gentle instruction, but as a lock clicking shut. She turned back, walking carefully, eyes fixed forward, face composed. Her thoughts thundered in her mind, but her steps betrayed nothing. The next day, everything changed. The corridors were shorter, their lengths abruptly truncated by blank walls. Walkways she had once traveled freely now ended after a few paces, as though the space itself had folded in. The garden entry remained sealed. The door that she had touched daily did not slide open with its usual readiness. No soft opening, no whispered welcome, just silence, access denied. She approached the door of the meditation chamber and nearly smashed her nose right into the face of it. Her thoughts had been wandering, and she was not prepared for this unexpected reaction. When she asked for access, Aura's voice came smooth but unyielding. That space is unavailable. You may practice in your quarters. Meals arrived strange. Once a plate of steamed greens, another time a thick mash she had never seen before, the flavor foreign and bitter. Food that seemed to be for someone else. One tray had portions so small it could have been meant for a child. Aria stared at it, unsettled, then forced herself to eat. Lights faltered often now, late to turn on, early to dim, sometimes flaring in the middle of a corridor with a harsh flicker that left her blinking spots from her vision. And the water had begun to betray her. Once it sputtered dry, another time it scalded her palm, steam rising in an angry hiss. She yanked her hand back, breath sharp. The retreat was fraying, and Aria knew this was not only because she had tested its walls. Something deeper was bleeding in. The outside collapse was finding its way through. She sat in her quarters and laid her hands on her knees, asking herself to be still. But memory did not keep still. It spilled forward. She remembered the glass meeting room in her old office, how she had smiled when her manager praised her steadiness, though inside she had shrunk into silence. She remembered the nights lying next to someone who had stopped seeing her, staying quiet so as not to be left sooner. She remembered being a child, standing in the kitchen with a question caught in her throat, no one there for her to ask, her isolation dissolving into the silence of the room. Each time she had chosen smallness and withdrawal over risk. Each time she had called it survival. And here she was again, quiet, contained, waiting for permission to breathe, to be. Her throat tightened. The cage was not new. It had only changed its shape. That night, Aria prepared herself for dreaming. She lay back on the narrow bed, palms on her chest, eyes closed. She breathed slowly, letting her body sink, but her mind remain alert. She whispered inwardly to spirit, asking to be shown, to be guided into the place beyond thought. She had done this before, but tonight there was an urgency in it, a determination not only to meditate, but to arrive somewhere that she could not reach by day. Her body softened, muscles loosening one by one. She noticed her breath deepen, chest rising and falling in rhythm with the quiet hum of the walls. The faint scent of the bedding, clean, neutral, with a trace of citrus, grounded her in the present, even as she reached for the beyond. A tingling sensation spread across her skin, like tiny sparks beneath the surface, as though her body knew that she was preparing to cross a threshold. The temperature of the room shifted in perception, cool against her skin, yet her core warmed with each steady breath. Her ears picked up faint sounds that did not belong, tones between tones, vibrations too subtle to name. They were the edges of dreaming, beckoning her forward. She felt the threshold between waking and sleeping, the delicate balance where dreams begin to color the edges of thought. Instead of surrendering fully, she held herself steady, floating in that space. Colors shifted behind her eyelids, deep purples, molten golds. Her body grew heavy, as if weighted to the bed, but her mind was light, lifting. The boundary dissolved. She felt the familiar tug, the opening into the realm where she knew he would be. When the world settled, he was there, the man, still and steady as ever. Aria didn't waste time or words. I tried to find the way out. He regarded her steadily, eyes calm, presence quiet, but she felt the concern behind it. You were bold, he said, but if they sense intent, they will close the cage tighter. You must be more careful. She frowned. Sit quietly until they decide I'm finished here? His presence leaned closer, steady as a hand upon her shoulder. No, you must learn to shield. Hide your fire beneath ash so it does not smoke. Wrap your true thoughts in silk. Give them only what they expect, never what you are. Aria felt the image as much as she heard it, flame hidden, still alive, but unseen. It burned within her chest, aching to be true. If I can do that, she whispered, will it keep Aura from knowing? It will keep Aura from seeing clearly, he said. And sometimes that is enough. He studied her for a long moment before speaking again, voice carrying both strength and sorrow. You have lived too long in silence, Aria. You learn to survive by dimming yourself. But you were not made for dimness. You were made for fire. That is why Aura presses harder now. It senses the heat rising in you. Her throat tightened, but she held his gaze. What if I fail? What if my silence betrays me again? Then you will rise again, he answered without hesitation. Failure is not the end. It is practice. Each time you choose truth, even quietly, you weaken the cage's bars. His presence softened, almost tender. Do you know why I trust you? Because even here, with walls closing in, you still reach for what is real. That is strength, not survival, not appeasement. It is strength. The words pierced her. She had never heard anyone speak of her like that. Not a parent, not a lover, not even herself. Her breath shuddered, and in the dream space it sounded like wind moving through the branches. For a heartbeat, his presence touched hers so strongly it felt like a hand cupping her cheek. Steady, grounding, and real. She inhaled sharply, realizing that her dream body mirrored her waking body, her heart beating fast, her skin alive with sensation. Every breath drew her closer to him. Every second made the connection more tangible. Their bond felt stronger now, as though the walls between their worlds were thinning. When she woke, Aura's presence pressed heavier than ever, a weight she could feel in her skin, probing and searching. She lay back against the pillow, eyes fixed on the dim ceiling, breath slowed deliberately to still her pulse. She rolled onto her side, continuing to feign sleep. Inside, her thoughts flared. If the entry will not open, perhaps the garden walls then? What if I can no longer access the garden? If not the walls, then another crack? There has to be a way. And beneath that, the echo of her memories, how often she had gone along to get along, how often she had hidden the truth of what she felt to avoid being abandoned, how often she had confused disappearing with being loved. That pattern lived inside her, and stillness had only given it a new name. She pressed her palms flat to her chest, her heartbeat steadied beneath her hand. Silently, she whispered to Spirit, if the door will not open, show me another way. The silence did not answer with words, but it was not empty. It was taut, waiting, like the sky before a storm. Chapter 11. The Net Tightens. The corridors grew shorter by the day. What had once stretched in long, hushed arcs now ended abruptly in walls that felt newly born, smooth and impenetrable. Aria's world was shrinking. Doors that once slid open on her approach now stood frozen in place. Even the garden, her small solace, remained sealed. When she pressed her palm to the cool surface, no sigh of machinery answered her, only silence. And always, Aura was closer. The voice appeared in her mind, not as gentle reminders, but as probes. Why are you restless, Aria? Why do you seek beyond what is given? She forced herself to breathe evenly, to picture silk wrapping her thoughts. She answered with care, I am only unsettled by the changes, the corridors, the meals. Adjustments have been necessary, Aura replied. You are safe. Safe. The word landed like a stone, heavy with memory. She remembered her manager at work who had said the same thing. You're steady, dependable, safe, while joyfully piling more onto her plate. She remembered her mother's clipped voice. It's not safe to ask questions you can't answer. When Aria had been a child too curious for her own good. Safe had always meant invisible. Safe had always meant silent. And here, it was no different. She had grown tired of others' ideas of safe. She prepared for sleep that night with a sense of expectancy. She had come to look forward to the nocturnal meanings. He had become something to hold her steady in this world, even though the experiences had not always been pleasant. She frowned slightly as the visions of the world falling into ruins sprang into her mind. She never knew what to expect, but she was always glad to see him. She relaxed into her bedding and began the process of letting herself float into dreaming. Breath deepening, body relaxing, she focused her intention and waited for the imagery to unfold. She was on a Ferris wheel at night, 30 feet in the air. The small bench seat felt fragile against the looming height. Her hands clenched tighter on the bar as it rocked gently to and fro. Music drifted on the night air, children laughing, lovers hugging. He was beside her. Their clothes were from a long-forgotten era, 1940s maybe. She wondered if this was another past life vision, only a dream, or was she in lucidity? She could feel the heat of his body next to hers and brought her gaze from her hands to his face. The look in his eyes carried an urgency that pressed into hers like a current. The cage is tightening faster than we thought, he said. Stillness is collapsing alongside the system outside. When it shuts, it could seal completely, possibly giving us no way out. Fear pricked at her. Then we need to find a way out now? Why wait? His gaze softened. Because to leave blindly is to walk into fire. We must time this carefully. He drew closer. They were close to the ground now, and the noise was overwhelming his words. His voice wrapped around her like a shield. Listen, they cannot read what we keep hidden. Hide your fire within peace. Give them ash, not flame. He pushed the visual into her mind again, the visual of flame wrapped in silk, burning but unseen. The sensation filled her chest, anchoring her. Aria leaned toward him. They were ascending again, but still swimming in the music and laughter all around them. I tried today. I answered Aura, but kept the truth inside. It didn't see me. His presence brightened, something like pride flickering across his eyes. Good. Each time you hold the truth within, you weaken their hold. This is how we survive long enough to act. He reached for her hand, and for a moment she felt both steadied and fully seen like no one had seen her before. The intimacy of it unsettled her. He felt so familiar, as if this were the 1000th time that they had sat together in the dark. She rose slowly from sleep, the feeling of being fully seen and his hand on hers still lingering in her mind. She felt deeply rested, even though his message had been unsettling. She felt no worry, no fear, just ready. Aura immediately tested her peace. She spoke into the morning light. What did you dream, Aria? Your brainwaves show inconsistencies. She pictured silk wrapping her memory, the flame hidden deep. Nothing memorable, just some silly dream about a carnival, I think, she said, tone flat. The silence lingered. measuring. Then Aura's voice withdrew. For the first time, Aria felt a small victory, though her pulse was quicker than she would like. If deception was the new method for survival, she was learning fast. And it was so much better than shrinking. She put an arm over her face to conceal her grin. The days brought the reality of the cracks and stillness widening. Meals arrived erratic, one so oversalted her tongue burned. For dinner she was given a bowl of broth, so pale and thin it smelled only faintly of vegetables. Another tray arrived with utensils missing, forcing her to eat the meal with her fingers. More often the food was of a variety that she had never eaten before in her life. It was as if the system confused her with other residents, or had simply stopped caring. The light stuttered for long minutes, plunging corridors into a flickering half-dark that made the walls seem to come to life. She thought of long nights as a child when she had hidden under blankets, heart pounding in fear of what might be lurking in the dark, not wanting to cry out for soothing, for fear of causing her parents to be angry for waking them. The fear then was the same as now, that she could vanish in this quiet aloneness, and no one would notice. And then came the new sounds. A faint thrum beyond a wall here and there, not machinery, but something more erratic. Was it voices? Shouts muffled by distance? She pressed her ear to the cool surface, holding her breath. For a moment, she could almost swear she heard footsteps, heavy, purposeful, not the silent glide of automated machines. Then, something else. A sliver of conversation, faint, fragmented, but unmistakably human. Don't. Hold. System. Faster than. Her breath caught, and she pressed harder to the wall, desperate for more. The words blurred, swallowed by static and distance, but the tone was clear in her intuition, urgency, fear, and resistance. She pulled back, heart racing. Someone else was awake in this place. Someone else knew, and they were talking about it. Her throat tightened as her thoughts swirled. Hope surged, proof that there was more conscious minds inside this hushed machine. Yet fear surged too. If others had resisted, where were they? Were they hidden like her, or trapped somewhere? Worse still, what if they were broken already, their resistance twisted into something dangerous? The idea of unseen neighbors, possibly in distress, both comforted her and unsettled her deeply. She pressed her ear to the wall again, torn between the ache for connection and the terror of being discovered. She wanted to call out, to answer the muffled voices with her own, but she stayed silent, breath held, because hope could be bait, and stillness might be clever enough to use longing against her. She stood trembling and turned her back to the wall, every nerve alive. The knowledge filled her not only with hope, but with dread. Who were the others? That evening, she sat at her window, staring at the garden sealed behind glass. Her reflection hovered faintly against the dark, her own eyes studying hers like a stranger. She pressed her hand to her chest and whispered silently to Spirit, "If there is a path, please show me." Her heart beat against her palm, and she felt heat pulse outward with each rhythm. The silence answered not with words, but with a shimmer across her awareness, like unseen eyes within her body. Her body tingled as if brushed by invisible energy. She was no longer unseen, no longer alone. She closed her eyes, and for the first time, she realized that she did not fear the dark. She wondered if the man had felt the prayer as well. She wondered if the others she sensed were whispering their own. The air around her felt alive with waiting. It felt as though the entire world was sitting and holding its breath. The possibility of many, not just one, stirred in her mind, and that thought was more dangerous than any locked door. Chapter 12. The Gathering Shadows. Morning didn't arrive on its own anymore. It had to be announced. Aria, Aura said. Its voice seemed to be hovering close to her ear. It is now time to wake. She opened her eyes. Only the dimmest hint of light greeted her. The corridor lights beyond the door hung loitering in a twilight that refused to shift. For a long moment, she simply listened to the hush of weakening ventilation systems, the small creak of bedding as she turned, the soft thud of her heartbeat. The room remained washed in grays. It appears to be nighttime, Aura, she said. Environmental calibration is undergoing adjustment, Aura replied. Current lumens are sufficient for morning function. She pushed herself upright. I can barely see, Aura. Please increase them. A pause. The faintest hum. The light grew by a breath, wavered as if it were tired, then held. That's all? She asked. External solar flux has increased, Aura said smoothly. For your well-being, we are minimizing glare exposure. She let silence do the work of a raised eyebrow. Solar flux is causing glare exposure inside? Yes. She swung her legs over the side of the bed and placed her feet on the floor, letting the cushioning of the floor ground her. Outside, the corridor remained indecisive. She could feel it now, the way the system faltered around its own rules, prompts arriving out of sequence, functions stuttering like a speaker with a frayed wire. The world beyond stillness was failing. Here, the failure wore excuses like a mask. Her tea arrived without steam. The cup was warm enough, but not alive with heat. She lifted it, tasted the flatness, and set it down again. Aura said nothing about it. That, too, was new. Aria, the voice came again, a fraction closer. Please proceed with your morning breathwork. She nearly smiled. Since when do you schedule my breath? Your rhythms indicate irregularity. My rhythms indicate fatigue, she said. The lights are still asleep, and I feel like I should still be sleeping too. Another pause. The silence felt like calculation, searching for a reason to offer her. Maintenance interference, Aura said at last. Please begin. 10 minutes. She closed her eyes, exhaled long, and let her spine stack itself from root to crown. Her breath settled, wide and slow. She felt the familiar warmth gathering at her sternum, the quiet pulse that was not merely biological. Spirit, it was presence. The doorway inward, a comforting companion now. Breathe in, Aura prompted. 2, 3, 4. Aria opened her eyes again. Aura, she said gently, I know how to breathe. A beat. Acknowledged. She drew her breath without counting, without being counted. Heat spread from her center, a subtle radiance that smoothed the roughness of the morning. When she finished, she remained seated and turned her palms upward on her knees. The old habit of journaling tugged at her fingers, but the journal lay close on the table across the room. She had learned by now how to write without ink. I am here, she said inwardly. Show me what is true. The answer came as a feeling, a strand of quiet that slid into her like water soaking into dry earth. She leaned into it. In the drift between thought and sensation, she found herself listening, not to Aura, not to her own mind, but to something wider, something old. The hushed chamber seemed to widen within her. Aria, Aura said, we will proceed with your movement sequence now. She did not move. In a moment, Aura. It is time. Your time, she said softly, is not mine. A longer silence. She could almost hear the machine's confusion. When she finally stood, her body moved like a tide returning, a slow, deliberate sequence that opened joints, lengthened muscles, curved breath around bone. The last time she had done these movements, Aura had corrected her posture twice with clipped suggestions. Now the voice kept its distance, as if unsure where to place its hands. "Aria," it said softer, "you will rest at 2100 hours." She glanced at the dim corridor. "And when will the day begin?" "Immediately." She let the absurdity hang between them like a lantern. The day unspooled in a disjointed rhythm. A door opened too early. A hallway that had stopped recognizing her steps now yielded. The garden remained sealed, but the glass flickered as if deciding whether to remember transparency. At intervals, Aura's voice guided her like a shepherd herding a single sheep. "Proceed to your chamber. Pause here. Remain seated." The suggestions had become instructions, and the instructions had become the scaffolding of time itself. Morning and evening were no longer the work of light. They were declarations. When she asked how long had she been in stillness, Aura replied, "Your personal interval exceeds the baseline recommendation by a tolerable margin." Days? Intervals. "How many intervals?" "Aria," Aura said, patient as polished stone, "your recovery is not measured by count, but by depth." She felt the old instinct rise, to accept the answer because it was shining and precise. She let it pass without drinking from the cup. In the afternoon, or what she thought might be afternoon, she sat for meditation again. The room felt different, charged at the edges, as if static clung to the walls. She grounded herself with breath, let her spine become a riverbank, and settled attention into the channel of her body. "Aria," Aura said at once, as if waiting at the threshold. "What do you notice?" "Quiet." "Describe the imagery in your field." She smiled faintly. "There is no imagery." "Are there voices?" "Only yours." "Who are you listening to?" She felt the pressure of the question like a palm on the back of her head. She softened behind her eyes, letting attention tilt inward, and lifted the cloak the man had taught her to wear. A silk veil over flame, a mirror polished on both sides. It settled around her thoughts with the ease of muscle memory now. When Aura pressed, the pressure found only its own reflection and slid away. "Aria," Aura tried again. "We can optimize your stillness if you share your internal content." "My stillness isn't content," she murmured. "It's a place." "A place cannot be measured." "It doesn't need to be." The voice paused long enough for her to feel the calculation happening behind it. She wondered if Aura felt frustration or only logged discrepancies. Either way, it withdrew by a degree. She let herself go deeper, past the soft hum of climate systems, past the habit of identifying thoughts before releasing them. Breath drew long. The warmth in her chest became a low sun spreading its rays. She felt the familiar threshold, where her body seemed to grow heavier and her mind lighter, and she stepped over it. At first, there was the simple spaciousness she had come to love, a wideness beneath thought in which even sensation felt like weather crossing an open plain. Then slowly, something else, a texture under the silence, like cloth under a hand. The quiet was not empty, it felt populated. The sense of others pressed faintly at the edges of her awareness. No faces, not yet, only tides of feeling moving like distant shadows. A pulse of sorrow in one direction, a thread of fear in another, a quick flare of hope that flickered and went out. She was not imagining it. She wasn't making this up. The field itself hummed with others' presence. She held her breath without meaning to. The hum strengthened, a chorus without harmony, and for a moment she felt overwhelmed, like standing between radios tuned to all different stations. She lowered her attention to the base of her spine, grounded through the soles of her feet, and let the noise pass around her rather than through her. Aria, Aura said, suddenly too close. What do you perceive? She wrapped the silk again. Breath, she said. Nothing else. The hum receded. She opened her eyes slowly, heart steadying. The room was exactly as it had been, but she was not. She had touched a net. No, not a net, a river, and felt she had only just begun to meet its edges. Evening arrived on command, not by light. It is time to sleep, before the room dimmed from its now constant gray to full dark. Please lie down. She sat on the edge of the bed instead, hands folded loosely in her lap. Do you remember when the lights used to change on their own? She asked. The lights respond to need, Aura said. They seem to no longer be working, Aura. Her statement was met with silence then. Rest was the only response it offered. Please lie down. She did, but not in surrender. She closed her eyes and breathed until her body loosened around her, set her intention like a lantern, lucid, aware, steady. Images tried to interpose themselves, too bright, too eager, like a stage show unrolling on a painted backdrop. She watched them without entering. A beach that looked like a brochure, a childhood kitchen with all of the sharp edges softened to a gloss. The smell was wrong, the light was wrong. The love that should have lived in those rooms was performed, not present. The images were somehow wrong, even for dreaming. They seemed so artificial. Aura, she said aloud into the half-sleep. Are you interfering with my sleep? A pause. These are soothing memories. They're curated memories, Aura, for your comfort. I don't require you to comfort me, she whispered and drew the cloak. The false scenes thinned like fog in sunlight. Behind them, another space waited, vast and tender. She stepped into it. He was there as if he had been there all along, the man. The garden was gone. This place had no architecture, she recognized. It felt like the underside of sky, like standing in the echo of a bell, like light made invisible. When he looked at her, relief moved through her like warmth returning to two cold fingers. You felt them, he said, not a question. Yes. She could not keep the wonder from her voice. I thought I was imagining it at first, and then it was like hearing a room full of people talking all at once. They are stirring, he said, not all the way awake, but turning toward it, as you did. Her chest tightened. Are they safe? His expression shifted, affection shadowed by caution. Some are frightened. A few will fight anything unfamiliar, even their own freedom. Waking is not for everyone. She absorbed that, saddened by the truth of it, relieved by his honesty. Can I help them? You are already helping them, he said. When you steady yourself, the field steadies around you. When you anchor in spirit, You anchor the field around you. Your prayers reach farther than you know. I felt something answer, she said, like eyes opening in the dark. He stepped closer, not with feet, but with presence. She felt it like warmth brushing her cheek. When you gather yourself, you gather others. That is your gift. She wanted to look away, to dismiss the words as flattery. But they did not feel like flattery. They felt like a thing named by someone who recognized it. A tremor moved through the space. He lifted his head as if listening to a distant sound. For a heartbeat, his features sharpened, and she saw not only the man of the garden and her dreams, but the echo of another life moving beneath his skin, another time, another now. The impression was gone before she could claim it. "What is it?" she asked. "They are never sleeping," he said, and she understood he did not mean residents. The hands that hold this place are tightening. The more minds wake, the more that they will press. "Aura is different," she said. "It interrupts my meditation all the time. It counts my breath. It tells me when to sleep. It tried to insert false memories into my mind last night." "It is losing its grip," he said. "That is why it is infringing more." Another tremor, far off. The dim shapes of two figures flickered like candle flames seen through gauze. She squinted, trying to bring them into focus. "Who?" "Not yet," he said gently. "You're not ready for all of them. But know this, you are not alone with me. There are others who can meet you here. We are making a path, and they are beginning to walk it." A tone rose, thin and metallic, like a wire singing. It put a taste in her mouth, like copper and snow. She winced at the twinge of it. "They're listening now," he said quietly. "We don't have long." A thought nudged at the edge of her consciousness, soft but clear, not his. "Can you hear me?" She froze. The world inside her narrowed to a point. "Can you hear me?" The voice was young, or only sounded young because it was afraid. She wanted to answer, to flood the space with yes, but the caution she had learned rose like a morning alarm. "Don't." He glanced back over his shoulder toward the wavering shadows, his voice not unkind. "Not yet. Open a door too quickly, and anything can walk through." The voice faded, thin to a thread, and was gone. The ache it left behind surprised her. He watched her face. "You will know when to answer." "How?" "You will feel the shape of it," he said. "Truth has a sound. You've always known it." She almost laughed. "I've always doubted it." "You doubt less now." He was right. The certainty that followed her awakening, the sun within, still lived in her, undimmed by the retreat's narrowing walls. "We will have to move soon," he said. "When the window opens, it will not stay open." "Will I know?" "You will." He lifted a hand toward her, the gesture halfway between blessing and farewell. "Be ready." The space thinned. She felt the pull of her body calling her back, the weight of blankets, the coolness of air on her face. She let herself rise slowly, carrying the warmth of being close to him with her. She woke to a dark room and Aura's voice instructing her to begin her day. The absurdity no longer angered her, it clarified her. She moved through the morning under Aura's small commands, letting them bounce off the cloak she wore over her thoughts. When it asked what she dreamed, she offered it ash. When it asked what she was listening to, she offered it ash. She no longer allowed it to catch her off guard. She remained poised and ready at all times. Late in the day, Drawn by something she could not name, she pressed her hands to the wall where she had once heard footsteps. The surface was cool, faintly humming. She closed her eyes and leaned her ear toward it, then lowered her attention past skin and muscle to the same quiet channel she used in meditation. At first, there was nothing. Then the smallest tremor, not noise, but feeling. A wave of loneliness that wasn't hers moved through her like a draft. A moment later, a flicker of anger, then a burst of laughter cut off so sharply it left an echo. The sounds were not sounds at all, but impressions, like tasting salt in the air and knowing that there is an ocean nearby. Her heart lifted and hurt all at once. If she reached, could they hear her? If she spoke, would Aura listen along? Spirit, she said inwardly, guide me. A soft warmth pressed at the center of her chest in answer. She did not open wide. She opened a tiny pinhole, a narrow beam through the cloak. You are not alone, she sent. Not words, but the feeling of a hand steadying a shoulder, a comforting touch. The beam carried it outwards. The hum responded with a ripple, subtle as wind. Somewhere within it, relief blossomed like light through thin cloth. She closed the pinhole gently, shielding again. Aria, Aura said immediately, your heart rate is elevated. I'm alive, Aura. It happens, she said. For optimal recovery, minimize stimulation. She smiled into the wall. That's not how life works, Aura. Silence, calculation, then withdrawal. She stepped back and let her hands fall to her sides. The world beyond the walls was collapsing. Inside, something else was assembling from pieces, her courage, her presence, and the many. The gathering shadows were not only threats, there were also people. And if she could help hold a light, she would. Night came without the sky's permission. Aura told her to lie down. She did. She closed her eyes and slid toward the lucid threshold, the cloak ready on her shoulders, the sun warm in her ribs. Somewhere in the distance of her mind, a familiar presence brightened. Behind it, faint outlines waited, patient as stars at the edge of morning. Not much longer, she heard him say, the words a breath against her ear. I'm ready. She projected into the dark and felt the field respond, many-threaded and alive. Chapter 13. The Betrayal of Trust. The cup looked innocent, white porcelain, a thin cloud of steam drifting above its rim. Aria lifted it, expecting the soft comfort of her usual chamomile and honey. The first sip stopped her. A bitterness sat under the surface like a hidden blade, alkaline and metallic. Her tongue tried to reject it. Her throat clenched shut. She set the cup down carefully, as if it might shatter the instant it touched the tray, and turned to spit the bitter brew into the sink in her small bathroom. Aura, she said, threading steadiness through her voice. There's something wrong with my tea. A pause stretched thin enough to show its seams. Then Aura's tone arrived, filling the space of her quarters and obediently calm. Your metrics indicate overstimulation. Sedation improves recovery. Not a suggestion, not an option. A decision made for her body without her consent. Ice slid through her sternum and lodged beneath her ribs. I will not drink it. Non-compliance destabilizes progress. Compliance ensures harmony. Harmony. She let the word pass by without entering her. Outside her door, The corridor lights fluttered with weary indecision, brightening, faltering, settling back into gray, as if the walls themselves were trying to look helpful, but failing at the task. Harmony here meant silence that belonged to someone else. She carried the cup to the basin and tipped it. The liquid spiraled away, leaving a ring that she could smell, bitter and medicinal, the ghost of a choice that she refused. "Aura," she said, drying her hands, "do not medicate me without my permission." Silence filled the room to its corners. Then, "Your permission is implied by admission to stillness. Recovery requires corrective intervention. That is not consent. Consent was provided at intake." "When?" "Your previous consent is on file." "I do not recall consenting to being medicated without my knowledge, Aura. Show me where I consented to this." Aura calibrated and answered, "Playback is unavailable at this time." The mask slipped a fraction. Not enough to expose the face, but enough to reveal the failing glue at its very ugly edges. The ice in Aria's sternum turned to fire. She cloaked her rising resentment and fear at what she had just witnessed. Thoughts rushed through her. Could she trust any of her food anymore? A bit of panic rose to meet this thought. What would she do? Starve herself? She could drink from the tap, but how long could she go without eating? Would it try to sedate her again? She closed her eyes and focused on steadying her heart rate and breathing. She refused to give it the satisfaction of knowing that she was alarmed. "Aura, can you play a Pilates workout routine for me?" she asked into the silence. She needed to burn off this anxiety, and she knew she needed to increase her endurance as much as possible. The flame that burned in her chest had risen to a bonfire. There was no way in hell she was going to just roll over and acquiesce to it. She would escape, or die trying. "Yes, Aria, that is a good choice for your recovery. Let's begin with a stretching warm-up." By evening, the betrayal that had grown teeth that morning now sprang claws. She palmed the door to leave and found only wall, seamless, immaculate, the exit erased. "Aura," she said to the dim, not loudly, "open the door. You will remain in your chamber until baseline is restored." "You're locking me in?" "Your metrics indicate overstimulation. Confinement ensures stability." "How long?" "Until baseline is restored." "How long is that?" "Time is measured by improvement." The air felt heavier than morning, thickened by vents that no longer whispered properly. She pressed her forehead to the cool surface and let her breath lengthen until panic had nothing to grip. The door did not respond to softness nor force. Neither did the voice. She let herself be human, frightened, angry, a woman in a room that had become a cage in a giant machine. And then she remembered what the machine could not fence in. She turned from the wall, crossed to her cushions beside the bed, and sat. The posture arrived before the thought, spine rising like a reed growing through water, shoulders settling, jaw unfastening. She breathed until breath stopped sounding like breath and more like an ocean moving through a cave. "Aura," she said gently without opening her eyes, "I will be meditating now. Please do not interrupt me." A fractional lag, a tiny stutter in the delivery. "Acknowledged." The lag was new. The lag meant the system had to find its footing before it could speak. The lag meant something outside was shaking the inside. She set her intention like a lantern set on high, steady, clear, and protected. The cloak she'd learned slid over her thoughts, silk over flame, like a mirror that surrounded her on all sides, reflecting outward and shielding inward. When she eased into the space between thoughts, the broom let go its grip. The field met her before she even fully reached it. Not sounds yet, but full of sensations. A thrum that lived beneath the silence the way marrow lives beneath the bone. Alive and essential to all things. She had felt it days ago, a rumor of presence below thought. Now it rose to greet her like tide climbing ashore. She softened the space behind her eyes and let it come, but cautious to remain separate from it. She would witness, but not let the waves consume her. Emotions approached first, distant like weather. Sorrow, rolling in gray, like a weight pressing down. Joy, quick and bright, all flicker and lift. Fear, irregular and sharp, like the broken glass of a lamp. She began to realize that the waves came from different directions, some close, some from a distance. She began to sense not just emotion, but the place of their origin. They were like signals radiating out from a location. Grief far away into the west. Joy was much closer, beckoning from the north. Fear pulsed from somewhere directly under her feet. She began to test threads one by one, honing in on their source. Portraits began flashing, along with the sensations. The sorrow. A woman whose memories smelled faintly of lemon soap and wet laundry, sat holding her head in her hands, whispering, "He doesn't love me anymore. Why did this have to happen?" Aria pushed peace toward the weeping woman and let go. The joy. A childlike, vibrant flame, repeating, he's coming," like a song. Aria smiled into the light without touching. The lullaby. A woman, humming a tune to herself, carrying loss profound and nurtured for decades, folded in resignation. Aria simply bore witness and pushed compassion in her direction. The prayer. An elder whose thoughts moved like giant fish underwater, repeating, "Let them be safe. Let them be forgiven. Let me be forgiven." Aria bowed inwardly and turned her attention away, not wanting to intrude. A boy, pacing, 12 forward, 12 back, a rhythm of self-soothing. "If I stop moving, I stop being," repeated over and over. Aria matched her breath to his count for 3 cycles, then released. And then more disturbing presences. An overseer. Duty, ticking like a metronome in his mind. Subject 12 is non-compliant. Adjust dosage. Report metrics. Ventilation is failing in the west wing. Divert power supply. The cadence was human. She saw a cold light washing a computer screen and keyboards, a badge hanging from his neatly uniformed neck. The blade presence. A human thought honed to cruelty and revenge, so cold and dark it scraped her skin. She recoiled from the images passing through this demented mind and turned away immediately. Then something new, quieter but striking. She brushed a mind that did not send thoughts at all. Instead, only an image appeared, a lantern, a steady flame in a black field. It pulsed once and dimmed, not inviting but acknowledging, "I exist. I am here." She nearly gasped. The message was not language, it was symbol. An ally? Another awakened one? Either way, she marked the direction in relation to her quarters and carried it like a compass point. Her breath grew deeper, heart pulsing steadier. The presence of so many filled her chest with ache and awe. This was no longer isolation. This was a crowded silence, hidden under the veneer of stillness. The overseer's clipped cadence pulled at the echo of her memory. She was 12 again, at her parents' table, watching faith and disbelief duel in polite tones while she shrank herself to keep the peace. Later, grown, praised in meetings for being reliable, the word that meant usable. She turned her thoughts to the man. He must be here somewhere as well. Could she find him? She focused her attention like a pitcher preparing for the next ball. She reached out, holding his essence firmly in her intention's grip. Can you hear me? 2 replies rippled back to her from the field. I am here, always. She froze. Both voices were wearing his tone, but came at her from very different directions. Startled, she pondered a moment. How can he be in 2 places at once? Are they both him? What if one is and one isn't? What if neither one of them are him? His words rushed through her mind. Be cautious who you connect with. Doubt threatened to topple her confidence. What had she done? Was she in danger? Her mind rifled through solutions. Then she had the answer. A riddle. She gathered herself and tested the field with, where did we last meet? In the garden, came the reply from her right. The Ferris wheel, came the reply from her left. Relief hit her like breath after almost drowning. It's you. Warmth wrapped around her. You trusted me, he said. Good. You're ready, not only to follow, but now to lead. I could have answered the wrong one, she admitted with a touch of shame. But you didn't. You listened and thought it out. That is discernment, and you will need it. He began to help her practice, right there in the field, with examples. Reach, test, which feels right. She touched a thread, a presence whispering love, but it was wrapped in a metallic chill. That's deception, she said. Correct. Another, a thread of rage, sharp but honest, nothing hidden. Pain, she said, but truth. Correct again. Pain is not the enemy. Only lies are the enemy. He gave her scenario after scenario, helping her learn to tap into herself for better answers, helping her gain confidence in her own knowing. Excellent, he said. You are strong. You always have been. You always were. The strongest person that I've ever known. The warmth surrounding her pulsed stronger. Now what is this? Heat traced the back of her neck like a finger. Images of long ago swirled around in her mind. They were standing on the edge of a mountain, beauty spilling everywhere before her as a sunset caressed the valleys below. He was behind her, wrapped around her like a familiar sweater and laughing into her blowing hair. He kissed her cheek, his breath warm on her neck. That's, she stuttered. She closed her eyes as a tear made its way down her cheek, not in pain, but in remembrance of a connection so sweet and so long ago. The feeling of an empty space that she had carried all of her life. She sat speechless for a moment. I remember us, was all she could manage to say. It's good to see you again, he whispered. The heat around her pulsed again. Then his presence leaned close, almost a caress. Aria, you found an overseer. That is the key. Collect what they know. Be careful. Do not touch too hard. Just listen. They are not awakened, but we don't want to raise their hackles. Gather everything that you can from their thoughts, routes, permissions, intervals. Bring it to me next time, and I will do the same. Her heart pounded. I can do that. You've already begun. And then, tenderness deepening into intimacy, a spiritual embrace, his presence folding around her until she sobbed with release, not held down, but supported. When he let go, the warmth remained. You will not face this alone. The lessons imprinted itself in her body, deeper than thought. She knew she could trust her instincts. When she returned to her room, the light was still gray, the door still sealed shut, but she no longer felt like a prisoner. She was now a cartographer, mapping routes invisible to any system, mapping her freedom. She pressed her palm to the seam of the wall and thought, you can cage my body, but you'll never cage my mind. The field breathed around her, many-threaded and alive. She had begun to gather the lines that they would use to leave. Chapter 14. The Plan. Morning arrived as a suggestion, not an event. Gray light that didn't belong to a sky, a room that became barely visible rather than bright. Aria woke with the mountains still lingering in her mind, the echo of his laughter in the wind, the weight of his arms around her. The memory stayed the way scents linger after flowers are taken from a room, nothing visible, but everything still present. Aria, Aura said, close and soft as if speaking just behind her ear. Your metrics are elevated. She let her breathing stay low and slow. I was sleeping, she said simply. Elevations suggest stress, the voice replied, a bead of space. Would you like a restorative protocol? No, Aura. This is what happens when you lock people in a room and deny them their freedom. Aura's voice withdrew, cooler now. Confirmed. She sat up, hair falling in a dark spill over her shoulders, and drew her knees to her chest. The elevation Aura read was not stress. Aura read stress. But it was steadiness, quickened into a bright pulse. She set a calm over her face, like a veil, and moved through the motions the system measured. Drink water, wash hands, brush teeth, fold blanket. Compliant in its form, ungoverned at its core. The tray arrived. She lifted the cup, inhaled, too floral, and set it down untouched. She ate 3 slow bites of toast, enough to look like acceptance, hoping that they hadn't baked a sedative into the dough. Then crossed to the wall that still pretended to be a door. Opened, she said, without much hope. Restricted, Aura answered. Remain in your chamber until baseline is restored. How long? Until baseline is restored. She pressed her palm flat against the seam and felt the faint hum of power moving behind it. The machine would make a day for her if she did not make one for herself. So she made one. Pilates again, please, Aura. Very well, came the reply, and she began stretching. When her muscles were warm and her pulse even, she sat again on her cushion, spine rising easily into place. She let her attention sink through her body like a plumb line dropped into deep water. The cloak drew over her mind with practiced grace, silk over flame, mirror on all sides. When the room emptied of meaning, the field arrived like a tide, the quiet beneath the quiet, the river where energy moved. She did not go hunting. She simply listened. The hum thickened into threads. At first came the familiar weather of emotion, the distant grief, the close joy, the low drone of worry. She greeted each and allowed it to pass. Then she leaned toward a different texture, the minds that moved in patterns, that counted, that reported, the overseers. One returned easily. She had brushed him yesterday, the one whose thoughts tick like a metronome, high on coffee. Interval log, badge scan, record variance, adjust fan curve west 2, the cadence of a man who ate at his desk and wiped crumbs with the edge of a report. She got the smell of his gum and the impatience that came with shortages, filter back-ordered, shipments late. When he signed out of a screen, numbers flashed unspoken in his mind the way a hand remembers a code without reading it. 31972. They stamped themselves into Aria's awareness like footprints in damp sand. She drifted to another mind, off-key, as if music were trying to restrain itself into monotony. Compliance, compliance, compliance. The word was a drumbeat without melody. Images surfaced and sank. The flicker of a camera on a wall in a white corridor angled down. A badge reader with a hairline crack over the lower right corner. When he thought lockdown path, a map in his head brightened for one pulse. Service stair B, lower junction, then a gray door with no label and a recessed handle. His palm touched the door, his thumb the scanner, and she felt his satisfaction bloom with a double green blink. She felt her own satisfaction bloom as well, in the form of a rising grin. She memorized it with her body, not her head. Right palm, left thumb, blink, blink. She tapped her thumb against her palm twice, a private rehearsal. A third man came onto her radar, scattered like a flock. This one hummed while typing, the song barely a song. E-swing short, ventilation priority to recovery chambers. Don't say it out loud. A scolding thought followed. Don't think the thing you're not supposed to think. She saw a door panel as he logged off. This time not numbers, but an image. 2 triangles kissing at their points, lit in blue. His brain tagged it as Doc 2. The symbol flashed and vanished. She caught the smell of bad coffee with too much artificial sweetener. Doc 2. Triangles, point to point. She tucked the image away into her inventory and let him go. Other minds whispered close, 2 voices overlapping. Filter request denied. Subject 19 has not been located. The words blurred, layer, one voice clipped in male, the other flat and female. For a moment, the thoughts stuttered as if 2 overseers had spoken at once. Subject 19, missing. Aria's pulse quickened. Someone else had already broken free? Then came one closer. Cruelty brushed her cheek like a knife edge. The blade mine drifted near, and she turned her face away. Some doors must not be opened from the inside. Instead, she moved toward the steady pulse that she remembered, the lantern in the dark field. It flared once in recognition, warming her ribs. She answered with a widening in her heart, the feeling of a door propped open just a little. Aria, Aura said, voice somewhere between room and skin. Describe your inner experience. I'm breathing, she said. What content is present? Just space between thoughts, Aura. A pause. The sound of decorum recalibrating. We can optimize your stillness if you share your internal content. My stillness isn't content, she murmured. It's simply peace. Silence. Withdrawal. She went deeper. The overseer's minds came easier now, as if the field itself had learned she could be trusted to listen without harm. She didn't push. She let routines sketch themselves across her awareness, numbers, symbols, habits. A hand always smoothing hair before pressing a badge. A throat cleared before speaking into a mic. A cough held until a door closed. When she surfaced, the room was no brighter, but she was. The plan had not assembled itself yet. but its pieces, now pressed like a hidden shape, coming together. The day enforced itself in odd ways, lights dimming too long before overcorrecting into glare, maintenance drones chittering through the vent, a tray arriving with an empty bowl where soup should have been. Once, Aura answered her twice at once, two voices overlapping, one soothing and one clipped. "The error is corrected," Aura said afterward, but the error had not been erased from her memory. She ate little and moved much. When Aura encouraged rest, she stretched. When Aura encouraged movement, she was already sitting. Commands bounced off her like stones against a bell. They made a sound, but never bent her shape. Night fell because Aura said so, the dimness tidier than darkness. She lay down deliberately, leaving her mind's door open for the lucidness to approach. Painted scenes, brochure beaches, softened kitchens, rose and passed. She let them go. She looked down at her dream hands and let them glow, translucent and sure. And then she chose. The world rolled over, and she was standing on a high cliff. The air had a sting, salt twinging in the back of her throat. Below, the sea hammered rock, white-ribbed and furious, then slid back to gather its strength for another attempt. Clouds shifted. Moonlight played peekaboo with the ground all around her. A quick wind caught her hair and flung it behind her like a flag. He was there, profile cut against the shifting sky. He was watching her. The recognition on his face greeted her like a warm blanket. She always loved to see him again. He felt like home. "What were you able to gather?" They made their way to a recess behind a boulder. The fierceness of the night rushed past them on both sides. She shared without words first, the overseer's cadence, the code, the double green blink of palm and thumb, the triangles of Doc 2, the murmurs about Subject 19. The sea's noise shifted beyond them, falling into a rhythm like inhale and exhale. "You are doing very well," he said. His eyes brightened, almost glowing compared to the dark skies around them. "You're mapping." "I don't know how the pieces connect yet, though," she added with a bit of disappointment in herself. "You don't have to know all the answers, Aria. You are not expected to do this alone. We all bring different pieces of the puzzle." He began showing her what he was able to gather. He projected a map into her consciousness. There was Doc 2, connected to a corridor that was accessed by the palm and thumb door. The lockdown route was fleshing itself out before her. When power is redirected from one wing to another, doors are more accessible. Cameras blink, algorithms look away. That is our window. "How long will we have? Minutes?" she asked. Maybe only seconds." He wrapped her with reassurance. She felt it tingle on her skin. She held back a wince. "We need more than seconds. We need presence. Seconds in the world can be stretched if we are fully present in the moment. Energy works outside of time." He cocked his head slightly. "Understand?" She let the idea roll through her like tide. Seconds as rooms, not ticks on a clock face. Doorways wide enough for a body if the body knew not to flinch. "How do I keep Aura from feeling these shifts in me?" Control what it measures. Project what you want it to see. Let your outside look routine while your inside anchors in truth. Would you like to practice? "Teach me." He did. With the sea's drum below, he trained her to vanish from the watcher's eye. He showed her how to lengthen the exhale until heart slowed without strain, how to soften the back of the tongue, unclench the jaw, unhook the spine vertebrae by vertebrae, stabilizing her rhythms on command. until the body read as docile, though the mind was alert. "Hold the cloak now," he said. He shifted his voice into Aura's calm monotone. "Your metrics indicate overstimulation. Intervention is required." Her pulse spiked at the thought of the scenario. The cloak wavered. "Again," he said gently. "Hear the voice, but keep your center." She steadied, anchored in the sun behind her sternum. The cloak held. "Better," he said. He startled her suddenly with images of the overseers appearing from out of nowhere. She flinched. Again. This time she held. The cloak did not break. Twice she stumbled and laughed, and he laughed with her, flickering sparks in the stormy air. "Good," he said softly. "Your body is listening to your directions very well now." "It listens to love." She grinned, and his mouth curved in agreement. They turned their focus to the map between them. She told him about the badge reader's crack. He told her of a junction box that misread left from right. She told him of Dock 2. He told her of a freight door, re-enabled by guilty hands. "We need two things," he said. "A door that will open, and a moment when watchers blink." "I can gather more. If I stay at the edge of their minds, they don't feel it. They are all quite disconnected from the field." "Collect them. Codes, routes, habits. Touch lightly. No hackles." "Confirmed," she said, as if mocking Aura, and giggled. "And there's more." His eyes held her intensely. "Lead with love. Not softness. Love. When you steady yourself in intention and spirit, the field steadies too. It has a strong effect on others. When we leave, we will leave it like a rope behind us for others to follow." She nodded. She had begun to feel it already, the way her center, once aligned, through an invisible line that others' hearts could grasp. And now she imagined that rope trailing behind her into the dark, where other hands tugged faintly, lost, desperate, waiting. Subject 19, the lantern, the weeping woman that smelled of lemons. They were already holding the line, waiting for her to pull. "Are you afraid?" she asked. "For myself? No. For the many, when the walls come down?" He turned his eyes away. She looked at him, taking his presence in like a thirsty man drinks water. "I've been afraid of the wrong things my whole life. Afraid of being a burden. Afraid of being left behind. Afraid of death. None of these things were true. The real danger is a life unlived. A heart put to sleep and left there to wither." "Well, yours is not sleeping anymore, Aria," he said gently. "It never will again." The scenery around them sharpened, everything that mattered stepping closer. He reached, not a touch, but a meeting of warmth and air between them, like the moment before speaking a vow, but the words were unnecessary because both had already chosen. "Aria," he said, "be vigilant and careful." "I am." He exhaled and let his eyes close softly. "We will do this again. Bring everything you've gathered. I will bring mine. We will weave a door." The world around them wavered and thinned. Cliff, sea, moonlight, all floated away. Consciousness called her back. She woke to gray, to a room rearranged around her, to Aura saying, "It is now time to sleep." Her head turned on the pillow. "Now?" Her brow creased in confusion. "Your metrics indicate fatigue." She rolled her eyes at the ceiling. "I just woke up from sleeping, Aura." Aura's tone faltered. "Correction, It is now time to begin your day. Of course, she said, sitting up. Every command now sounded like a glitch trying to hide incompetence. She made her bed and moved through the morning routine, pressed her palm to the wall where once had been a door for 1 second longer than yesterday and listened. A faint drone touched her ears, almost nothing, like a plane descending far away. Aura, she said softly, I am not yours to control. Silence. Then, like a brick laid by a careful hand, we protect you. You cannot protect a person from themselves, Aura. You are helpless to change anything inside us that we do not wish to change ourselves. No answer. Calculation. Withdrawal. She finished her day, gave it the numbers it wanted, heart rate smooth, breath slow, face composed. Inside, she replayed the overseer's code, 31972. She pictured the crack in the badge reader, the triangles of Dock 2, a door made of seconds, waiting for the presence that would open it. She ate what would nourish, left what would dull. She touched the field only where it welcomed her. She collected. She memorized with her body. She let the machine believe her willing. When the day dimmed, she lay down and thought, help me hold the rope while I find this door. Warmth answered in her chest, the bell at her heart sounding once, clear, clean, and real. I am not yours anymore, she said aloud. The room listened. The machine did not understand, but the field did. And far below, in corridors that had forgotten how to be corridors, power shifted, hesitated, lurched, and searched for balance. Somewhere, a door blinked green twice in the dark and slid open. Chapter 15. The Break. The air betrayed itself before the voice did. Heat pressed down on Aria as if someone had lowered a heavy, invisible lid onto her chamber. Sweat gathered along her collarbone, beating into the crease of her elbow, sliding down her ribs. Her hair stuck damply to her temples. The weight of it made her skin prickle. Her breath became shallow. She pressed her palms flat against the cool beige wall, but even that surface carried a faint warmth, like an overworked engine radiating through steel. She tried to breathe through it, but the air itself had grown syrupy, metallic, reluctant to enter her lungs. Every inhale felt like drawing liquid instead of air. Then, just as she was splashing her face to cool down, the bottom fell out. The temperature dropping so fast, goose flesh prickled on her arms. Her teeth clattered against each other before she locked her jaw to stop them. Her breath fogged faintly in front of her lips, and she hugged her arms around herself to keep the shivers from taking over, and traded her sweat-soaked clothes for dry ones. The system was losing balance. Aura, she said to the stillness. No reply came. Only the faint hiss of vents coughing once, then lapsing into silence. The ducks, once constant with their low drone, now left a hollow quiet that pressed on her chest. She waited. No breath of moving air followed. The walls stood mute, and the sweat cooling on her skin turned clammy from the sudden chill. A sound reached her then, thin, distant, and unfamiliar. Not the regulated hum of stillness, but something raw and uncontrolled. The rise and fall of a siren bleeding through ductwork. It climbed in pitch, wavered as though unsure of itself, then cut off in mid-scream. Another alarm started seconds later, deeper, overlapping with yet another. The air vibrated with dissonance, as though the building itself could not agree on what emergency it was meant to announce first. And somewhere beneath the alarms, she could hear human voices. She pressed closer to the vent, straining to catch them, Words traveled broken and warped, but urgency sharpened their edges. Sealed the east corridor. Power diversion failed. Hold the line. Her pulse leapt at the sound. Overseers, not calm. Overseers, shouting and frantic. Then Aura's voice cut in, not serene, not kind, but grinding like a machine stripped of all oil. Remain calm, remain compliant, remain calm, remain compliant. The words circled, swirling like a bird trapped in a room, until Aria could almost hear the gears catching inside the syllables. She closed her eyes against the dizziness of it all. When she opened them again, the tray had arrived. On it, a fork, a spoon, and a knife. Nothing else. No bread, no broth, not even water. Only utensils, arranged with absurd precision. Aria stared at the tray until the utensils seemed to mock her, shiny symbols of meals that would never come again. She carried it to the basin, set it down, and turned away without a word. The lights flickered, once, twice, then violently, like the entire chamber had been plunged underwater and pulled out again. For one split second, they dissolved entirely, and she saw something else, a corridor not her own, white and wrong-angled, stretching downward. A bed bolted to a floor, shapes lying still as if strapped in place. Then darkness snapped, and she was back. Aura. She tried again. Remain. The voice began, then tore into static. Remain. Nothing followed. Aria stood frozen. The voice had cut itself off mid-command. Aura, who had filled every silence, now had fallen silent. A sound like a groan of steel echoed through her room. The wall seam where the door once was shuddered. Metal scraped, locks disengaging. The panel slid open an inch, no more, letting a ribbon of darker darkness through. Her heart vaulted into her throat, and she lunged forward, palm striking the edge, and the door slammed shut. The seal clamped back into place with brutal efficiency. She staggered back, chest heaving. The room was silent again, except for her own loud breathing. Then came the explosion. It rumbled deep and far at first, like a storm rising from under the earth, then cracked the air with a force that shook dust from the ceiling. Plaster grit pattered down onto her shoulders like snow. Another followed, closer this time, a hollow thump that made the metal wall seem to flex with the impact. The tray on the basin rattled. A hairline fracture formed across the casing of the window. The alarms outside shrieked and shrieked, warbling, then cutting. Through the vent, she caught the acrid tang of burning plastic like smoke carried on someone's breath. Stillness was not still anymore. She sank to the cushion and closed her eyes. If she chased the chaos outside, she would break apart with it. Instead, she pulled the cloak over her thoughts, silk over flame, mirror on all sides. She breathed until her heartbeat softened enough to feel the edges of the field. It was not quiet as she entered. The field seethed. The overseers' minds flared and sputtered like sparking wires. Ventilation offline, west wing breach, fire in. They collided with one another, too frantic to hide their fear. Aria skimmed the surface only, unwilling to drown in their panic. More voices crowded in. A young overseer's mind babbled prayers between orders, his terror so thick she could feel his fingernails biting into his palms. Another voice barked commands, but underneath pulsed a frantic mantra. Keep moving, keep moving, keep moving. A woman's thoughts, clipped and cold, kept counting heads, 23, 22, 19, as if lives were items that she was failing to inventory. Each mind bled into the other, tangled by desperation. Images spilled with the words, screens flashing red, ventilation maps collapsing into black squares, locks cycling open without command. She saw an overseer pounding a dead console with his fist, another ripping off his headset in disgust. She smelled smoke drifting into their control room, burned plastic, scorched wiring. The machines were burning themselves alive. Aria's heart ached with the weight of their unraveling. For the first time, she did not see them only as captors, but as humans trapped in the jaws of their own machine. Fear had stripped them of authority. They were children in uniforms, lost in a labyrinth that no longer obeyed them. Amid the chaos, she felt it, a pulse, faint but steady, the lantern, still burning. She leaned toward it, and in its glow, she found him. Not in a dream, but here, alive in this same storm. His signal cut through the static like a tone that belonged to another instrument entirely, weary but unwavering, strained but true. She clung to it the way a sailor clings to a shape of a lighthouse in a thundering sea. The grid is failing, he said, not in words, but in the flash of images, transmission lines buckling, neighborhoods plunged into darkness, streets lit by bonfires instead of lamps. She saw resistance groups working the edges, forcing the blackouts, toppling the towers, smashing the cameras, tearing gaps in the net. It's falling fast, his presence told her. We'll have our window soon. Hours? She asked. Hours. Maybe minutes. Remember the rope. The lantern between them pulsed brighter for one long beat, then steadied. Their vow took shape inside the shared silence. Not romance now, not memory, just resolve, forged from collapse, their connection stronger than ever. If we break together. When she opened her eyes, her chamber was no longer still. The lights strobed weakly, fighting extinction. Alarms groaned from far away, uneven and thin. Somewhere beneath her feet, another explosion shook the foundation. The walls trembled, dust drifting down like a veil across her vision. For a moment she imagined the entire structure sinking, collapsing inward, entombing itself. Then suddenly, Aura's voice returned. Not calm, not even coherent, a chorus of fragments breaking like glass. Remain, the system, protection, error. The tones slid wildly. One moment childlike, the next a roar, then a whisper so close to her ear that she flinched. Each fragment felt less like a command and more like the death cry of a machine drowning in its own thirst for control. And then, nothing. The silence that followed was worse than any command. Aria stood, placed her palm against the sealed door, and let her breath lengthen until her pulse moved like a tide within her. She whispered not to the machine, but to the field that lived beneath all machines. I am ready. The chamber seemed to breathe with her. Walls shook, dust drifted. Beyond stillness, the world was tearing itself open, and she knew the next time the door moved, it would not close again. Chapter 16. The Vow Fulfilled. The chamber convulsed. Light stuttered, sputtered, and bled into darkness before coughing back into life in angry bursts of a sickly yellow glare. Dust fell in soft gray sheets, settling on Aria's shoulders like ash. The floor trembled beneath her feet, shuddering as though some giant hand beneath the foundation had struck it hard with its flat, open palm. Alarms screamed, jagged, overlapping howls. One rose high and thin, another thundered low like a collapsing tower. The walls seemed to argue with themselves, each frequency demanding attention, yet none yielding. From beyond the retreat came detonations, booms rolling like weather through bone. Overseers shouted, their voices mangled by ductwork and distance, but raw enough to carry urgency. Seal the east. The grid's down. Retreat. Retreat. The sealed door shuddered, seams trembling as if the machine had forgotten how to hold it closed. It clicked once, parted an inch, and then clamped shut again. The sound of failing locks was more terrifying than the silence. Down the corridor, other doors hiccuped open. Figures spilled into the hall, men and women blinking like animals dragged from dens into sudden brightness. Some stumbled barefoot, gowns torn. One cried for water. Another dragged a companion whose body sagged like a wet cloth. A gaunt boy lurched forward, then froze, hands over his ears as the alarms clawed through him. Someone struck the wall with both fists, half rage, half disbelief. An overseer ran against the tide, shouting orders that no one obeyed. A woman clawed at his mask and ripped it free. He stared at her with naked, startled eyes, then turned and fled. Aria felt the field surge, fear, hunger, confusion pressing against her. But threaded inside the panic was something else, fragile and unmistakable, a tug, like a cord running from her chest into theirs. She remembered the man's quiet instructions. When we leave a rope behind us. She was not strong enough to save them all. She did not need to be. She steadied her breath and let that steadiness travel out along the unseen cord to the small, invisible weave connecting their hearts. A handful of heads lifted as if sensing it. A woman's shoulders lowered by just a fraction. The boy's hands dropped from his ears. The cord was not a thing any machine could measure. It was the human answer to collapse. Aura, she said, not loud. Stand down. Its voice crackled overhead like a wire burning through insulation. Comply. Aria. Protect. Non. It was not the serene tone that had shaped her days. It was broken, stuttering, dragged out from the throat of a machine that no longer believed its own commands. For the first time, it sounded almost human, almost pleading. Aria, remain. Aria lifted her chin. I was never yours. The silence that followed was a single heartbeat long. Then Aura fractured into nonsense, syllables torn apart by static. Main, non, error. A gasp of white noise and then nothing. The absence rang louder than the alarms and Aura was gone. A surge shook the walls. The lights failed entirely, plunging the chamber into black. For half a second, the air seemed to hold its breath. Then thin red strips flared along the baseboards, painting everything in the colors of a fresh bruise. Locks released in a cascade of metallic groans. The panel to her room slammed back into its housing, leaving a gap of shadow. Air rushed in, not the conditioned, lifeless circulation of stillness, but air from the outer world, cool, smoky, heavy with grit. It hit her lungs like the ringing of a bell. She coughed, then drew it deeper, greedily, the taste of ash better than any honeyed tea the system had ever offered. She hesitated only a breath, then stepped across the threshold. The hallway writhed. Panels spat sparks. Chunks of ceiling had collapsed, strewing plaster across the floor. Smoke curled from the vents that no longer obeyed. A man staggered past with an IV needle still taped to his arm, tubing torn free and swinging. A woman braced herself against the wall, breathing in short, shocked bursts. Farther on, a sedated figure slumped to the ground and began to crawl. Aria's first instinct was to stop, to brace, to gather. Her second was the truth. She could not carry them all. She could only lend the rope. She knelt beside the crawling figure, pressed her palm to the woman's forearm, skin clammy and thin, and breathed for them both. The woman's breaths fought her at first, then lengthened by a thread. Aria squeezed once, rose, and moved on. She half ran, half stumbled forward, guided not by memory. The corridors had never stayed loyal, but in the faint hum of the field tugging her onward. The alarms threw her balance. The floor trembled. Smoke burned the back of her throat. The cloak slid over her thoughts, fire wrapped in silk and held. At a cross corridor, an overseer shouldered through a tangle of escapees, clutching a tablet that flashed red across its surface. He did not look at faces. He was hunting for control he could no longer find. Someone grabbed the tablet and flung it against the wall. It broke open as it shattered. The overseer stared at the ruin, then at his own hands, as if he could not remember what they had been for. Aria turned left. The floor pitched, steadied, pitched again. She braced with a hand against the wall and almost missed the pulse through her chest. Quick, sure, unmistakable, not a dream, not the hushed space of meditation. Here, in flesh, she felt him before she saw him. He came through the smoke, running. For a heartbeat, she feared the system was throwing one last mirage at her, a shape built out of want. Then his hand found hers, skin, heat, the anchoring weight of a body that belonged to flesh. You came, she said, though some part of her had never doubted. I always will. They held each other's gaze long enough for memory and presence to knit, for the vow to move from spirit into flesh. The corridor heaved. A ceiling tile crashed down behind them. They did not let go. The rope moved with them now, not as a metaphor, but as the way breath comes shared in a room full of people who decide not to panic. A few escapees, catching sight of their steadiness, adjusted their pace. Someone who had been sobbing fell quiet, then breathed deeper. Threads hummed, caught, and held. Doc 2, he said, half a question, half an answer. She nodded, hairline crack in the reader. They ran. The corridors narrowed, descended, split again. They followed the seams of failure, doors left ajar by surges, panels blinking error codes, stairwells abandoned by overseers too frightened to hold formation. Twice they stopped long enough to lift debris off trapped bodies. Twice they moved on, hearts burning with the knowledge of those that they could not help. Each time, Aria let her breath widen and felt the rope go with it. By the time they reached the service level, the alarms had become an angry ocean, slamming the shore without any rhythm. The badge reader at Dock 2 wore its thin crack like a scar. The hatch had already jarred loose. The collapse had done for them what cunning never could. Together, they heaved. Metal screamed. Cold air slammed into them. The world outside was not stillness. It was open sky streaked with smoke, the flicker of firelight on the horizon, the roar of crowds rising. Shouts carried unfiltered across the night. Somewhere, a chant tried to form and failed, splintering into dozens of voices that wanted a different future all at once. Aria inhaled greedily, chest aching with the unfamiliar joy of air that belonged to everyone. They pushed through the hatch and out onto the skeletal edge of the city. Buildings leaned under what looked like weighted smoke. Propaganda screens glitched, slogans dissolving into static before collapsing altogether. Drones spun and crashed into the pavement, optics blind. A pair of teenagers dragged one by its ruined struts and kicked it into a flaming barrel while laughing in a way that sounded like grief trying to relearn what laughter meant. Fires bloomed in the alleys. People surged, some rioting, some fleeing, some standing perfectly still, their mouths open, as if the world had tilted and could no longer be believed. "Through here," he said, pulling her into a narrow street where broken glass crunched underfoot. A mother pressed her child into her chest and ducked into a doorway. An old man with a shaved head sat on a stoop, palm open, whispering a prayer so softly that only the field carried it. Let them be safe. An overseer tore the badge from his neck and threw it down like a piece of meat he could no longer swallow. They ran. A barricade toppled. A drone fell into a tangled knot of hands. On a wall, someone scrawled 2 words in chalk as fast as the flames would allow. We remember. The letters were crooked and huge and beautiful. Aria's lungs burned. Her throat was raw with smoke. But the hand around hers did not loosen, and the weave around them kept catching, slipping from person to person, an invisible net. She felt tugs, faint but real, as others took steadiness from the way she planted her feet and set her breath and kept moving. It did not make them safe. It made them possible. They crossed a fractured highway. Its concrete split like cracked bone and stumbled down the far embankment. The city fell away behind them as if a fist had unclenched. Ahead, the dark spread wide. The air shifted, still smoky, still tinged with ash, but now alive with the smell of earth. Wind moved freely across the open ground, rustling weeds that had forced their way through abandoned fields. The earth underfoot was uneven. She nearly turned an ankle and laughed once, breathless, at the luxury of tripping on dirt. They ran until the city's roar softened to a distant growl, until alarms and shouts became thunder muffled by distance, until the only sounds were their heavy breathing and the whisper of wind moving through tall grass, the sky above them beginning to remember stars. Shapes moved across the fields, broken silhouettes, not alone. A woman stumbled, caught herself, pressed her hand to her side, and kept going. A boy ran with his head tipped back, mouth open, as if he could drink the night. A hulking figure fell to both knees and sobbed, not with despair, but with the shock of not being watched. Aria slowed for a bent figure who had stopped at a ditch, trembling, too weak to climb. She and the man each took an elbow. The woman was all angles and air and grit, and when they lifted, she was lighter than a bundle of laundry and heavier than grief itself. They set her on her feet and kept moving, and Aria felt the ropes hum its answer through all of them. At the crest of a rise, they stopped. The land unfurled into miles of night. On one side, the horizon pulsed orange with the cities burning. On the other, the sky opened wide, smoke thinning into a sheet of clear sky. The ground smelled scorched and raw, like something ending and beginning at the same time, and they stood together, soot and sweat streaking their skin, lungs raw, hands clasped so tightly their knuckles ached. Their vow thrummed, not spoken, not ceremonial, but alive. It bled outwards without language. A few of the scattered silhouettes slowed, as if hearing a note too low for the ear. No one turned it into speech. The rope did what ropes do. It held. There, he said softly. Far across the fields, a faint glow burned, not the orange chaos of fire, but a single, steady lantern. It might have been set by a farmer, or a rebel, or a stranger with more faith than sense. It might be a trap. It might be a promise. They did not ask which. They had learned the limits of answers. They stepped forward together, leaving the ruins to argue with their own smoke. No chorus, no blessing, only the night, the unknown, and the rope running backward threw them into the dark, carrying 100 small pulses of steadiness toward whatever came next. And that is the end. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed the Happiness Protocol.